news, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Six o'clock on the dot, Tuesday the 7th of November. You're very welcome to Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
A very good morning to you. Here's what's leading the news this morning. King Charles will today outline the government's lawmaking plans in a speech during the state opening of Parliament, with a general election drawing nearer.
The Prime Minister is quickly running out of time to deliver new ideas, but what are they? We'll have a full analysis of the speech here on Breakfast.
Enough is enough. That's the heading of a letter signed by UN leaders calling for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, but Israeli airstrikes are intensifying. Mark White has the latest from Tel Aviv.
A month on from the 7th of October attacks, Israel is tightening the noose around Gaza City. Despite the death and destruction already, the real battle has still to come.
And is it a court case or a campaign rally? A judge warns Donald Trump to end his political rants during a fraud trial into his business affairs.
Because it's a scam, and this is a case that should have never been brought, and it's a case that now should be dismissed.
And Paul Coit is here. He'll have all the latest in the sport for us.
Oh, what a night it was. Five goals given.
Haven't got my breath back.
God, I haven't either. Elizabeth's throat's still bad. 5 goals given, 5 goals disallowed, 2 red cards, 2 bad injuries, a partridge in a pear tree, a crazy night at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium as Chelsea beat Spurs 4-1 last night.
But could I just say, in your defence, 4-1's not a reflection of the game.
Thank you, Eamonn.
Yes, should have been 6. Anyway, let's take a look at your weather for the day in McGivern.
And you might not want to leave the house without an umbrella today. Another very showery day across the UK. Find out where we're most likely to see those showers in the full forecast coming up soon.
Now, look, what do you want to talk about today? Let us know, because Isabel thinks we're now in Christmas mode as soon as... No, it's a fair analysis. That as soon as bonfire night's out of the way...
Once bonfire night's out of the way, it's all go, go, go for Christmas, as far as I'm concerned. But I have an absolute allergic reaction to hearing Christmas music before November the 5th. It shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, before, right. But you're OK with Christmas music now?
Now, yeah. Do you know what I want to talk about today, though? I'm trying to work out if it's because I've moved out of London or if it is just genuinely a particularly spectacular autumn. But the leaves this year...
No, that's autumn's autumn. I actually think autumn's a bit late.
It's spectacular. The colours, the different oranges and golds. It's a bit like the plasma behind us. So do you think it's a special autumn?
Beautiful tree is a maple tree.
A maple?
Maple trees, beautiful.
I like a copper beech.
Red and copper.
Or an acer. I love a red acer.
Also today being reported in the newspapers that 1 in 4 of your bosses at work are psychos.
What about your colleagues?
What?
What about colleagues?
It's about bosses.
No, I know. I was just saying, you know.
No, I'm saying only 1 in 4. Only 1 in 4 of them are psychos. What is it about bosses? What is the pressure on a boss that turns them into psychos? And the thing is, can you be successful and be nice at the same time?
Oh, that's such an interesting debate. I very much subscribe to the you don't have to trample over your grandmother to get to the top.
But if someone tramples over you, do you bite back?
You've got to stick up for yourself, but I just think, you know, what makes a man, maneth maketh man. Yeah,
Okay.
that a little, but you
So
know what I
look,
mean.
there's so many things we
To
could be
talk about.
discussing. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com, or on the X-Files, or whatever it is, at GB News as well. Why are we not showing the X-File thing? Why are we not doing that?
I don't know.
Don't know. Well, just show people how they can do that. Twitter, in other words, run the sting. Today, folks, is one of the most important days in our political calendar. It's the state opening of Parliament.
And today, the King will conduct his first speech as monarch. But what is it, and what can we expect from the speech today?
Well, on the menu, criminal justice reform, including tougher sentences to tackle knife crime, new laws on strike action, and more oil and gas production to help reduce fuel bills.
And it's this last point that has sent Just Stop Oil off in a spin. 2 protesters were arrested after glass protecting the Rokeby Venus painting at the National Gallery in London was smashed.
While so many arrests were also apparently made by police along Whitehall, has Just Stop Oil also caused chaos marching on Whitehall?
And what about industrial action? Could new legislation be put an end to action that is deemed too disruptive? There'll be many feeling that the pain today as commuters in London are affected by industrial action on the DLR.
And forget about next day delivery from Amazon. They're on strike too. So would you welcome laws to put an end to this cycle of disruption? Well, of course you would, because it's not your grievance. So you know, these are populist, short-term measures, but do nothing to solve the problems. I mean, sacking ambulance drivers isn't going to get rid of ambulance queues or making ambulance drivers work for a certain amount of time. But should there be like a 40% minimum staffing at any time of the year, whether there is a strike or not? Let us know.
Well, all this and more is set to be outlined in the King's speech today. King Charles is first as monarch, the first to have a king since 1951, I believe, and it is likely to be the last such event before the next election.
Our political correspondent, Catherine Foster, is salivating at what's in store today. Give us the latest, Catherine.
So, a huge moment for King Charles, obviously the first King's speech for 70 years, and a huge moment for the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. He's obviously been Prime Minister for over a year, but this is his first chance to lay out all the laws that he would like to get through. And bear in mind, there's got to be an election by the end of January next year at the latest, end of January 2025 at the latest. This is his last chance, if you like. This is his big moment, but I'm not sure how exciting the contents of this speech is actually going to be.
Well, let's talk about some of the content. We talked a little bit yesterday about these new oil and gas licences, which will be interesting in and of itself, and lots of the papers picking up on this because the Green King is going to have to rip up the Green agenda, essentially, in Parliament today. But some of the other stuff centred around law and order is about tougher sentencing when it comes to the worst kinds of murders and rapes.
Yes, that's right. So there's about 20 bills, of which about 5 are being carried over that they didn't get time to get through last time, and a big focus on basically dividing lines with Labour. This is really about trying to win the next election. So huge focus on crime and justice, a huge focus on energy security. So in terms of crime, things like forcing convicted criminals to attend their sentencing. There was outrage, wasn't there, when Lucy Letby refused earlier in the year to show. That's been a habit that a number of killers now have said that, no, they're not going to show up. So that's going to be changed to make sure that they are physically there. Things like rapists, who are currently sometimes allowed out early, they'll have to serve their full sentence. Also, things like repeated burglars, shoplifting, etc., repeated offenders will get sent to jail. 20,000 new prison places, potentially. And also, police will no longer need a search warrant necessarily to enter a property if they believe there's stolen goods, if they have sufficient evidence. So the government is very keen to be seen to getting tough on law and order. And the other big one really is energy security. We saw yesterday, didn't we, Rishi Sunak, since the Uxbridge by-election that they won very surprisingly on an anti-ultra-low emission zone ticket. The government have rowed back on a lot of these green policies, saying, yes, we want to get to net zero, but in a more sustainable, in a more realistic way that's not going to cost people lots of money. So we've seen now they want to have annual licensing for new oil and gas drilling in the North Sea. That was announced yesterday. That's a really clear dividing line with Labour, who are sort of tying themselves in knots a little bit now over the approach to take, because up until Uxbridge, both parties were pretty much aligned on this. Other bills too, most notably Rishi Sunak's announcement, something very personal to him, that he basically wants to ban smoking. So if you're age 14 now, it will become illegal for you to ever buy a cigarette. Also on housing, phasing out of leasehold on new houses, not on flats, I understand. Media bill, football regulation, lots more. But will it be enough to change the Conservative Party's fortune?
So why is this smoking thing so personal to Rishi Sunak? Was he a teenage smoker? Do we know anything about his history in that?
I very much doubt, although I can't be certain that Rishi Sunak has ever smoked, but this has come from him, like the desire to basically reform A-levels. This is something that he feels very strongly about. He's obviously got young daughters. He feels it's been done, I think, in New Zealand. The smoking costs the NHS vast amounts of money, and the idea is he thinks to phase it out. I have to say it's quite popular, although there's plenty of people on the right of the Conservative Party that think, well, this is just nanny state, this is crazy. But so we'll have all the pomp and circumstance. They'll start out by looking for gunpowder, as they do every year. They'll take an MP hostage in Buckingham Palace until the King is safely returned. And then they'll spend 5 days, it's called a humble address, basically debating all of these laws. And then it will get voted through. I mean, to be honest, that's the technicality.
Well, they won't be able to do anything if Black Rod doesn't knock on that door 3 times and it's opened up. We go to David Leakey. David is a former usher off the Black Rod. And we say, so what happens to you now, David? Do you go into retirement, or once a Black Rod, always a Black Rod?
I think once you've been Black Rod, you're... One of the interesting things about being Black Rod is that nobody in Parliament knows your name. I remember sitting in a loo, in the Peers' loos once, and 2 peers came in to have a pee, and they were talking about me. And they'd asked me to a committee meeting, and when they'd finished, they said, oh, yes, that was a good idea to get Black Rod to come to this committee meeting. And when they'd finished and walked out, one of them said to the other, do you know what Black Rod's name is? So for many people, I meet them on the tube travelling through London, peers and MPs, and they say, oh, hello, Black Rod. So once you're Black Rod, you're always Black Rod. But but your retirement now, nothing to do with it now.
And for those who aren't familiar with Black Rod, just tell us a little bit about what you have to wear, because it's quite a costume, isn't it? And, you know, does this just come out once a year, or for other big ceremonial events within Parliament?
So here's the key thing. The state opening of Parliament is Parliament's annual festival. You know, we all have a birthday, universities have a graduation day, schools have prize giving day once a year. Parliament has state opening, and it usually happens just once a year. And everybody gets dressed up. Now, I say everybody gets dressed up. The peers get dressed in their ermine robes, and they only do it once a year. But Black Rod, and you can see in the pictures here, this was me when I was doing it, Black Rod gets dressed like this every day of the year, because every day there is a short ceremony at the beginning and end of a session, same in the House of Commons, where the Black Rod, or in the House of Commons, the Sergeant at Arms, processes in at the start of proceedings, and it is the formality of the day. And Black Rod, while Parliament is sitting, is always in uniform, like that. Slight embellishments, not wearing medals or the white jabot, but wearing the silk stockings, and if you look down at the feet, the buckled slippers, and the morning coat and the breeches with the Diamante buckles. If you want to be Black Rod, but you don't like wearing that, then don't apply for the job. But the job's open to anyone who wants to apply. Most people don't know what Black Rod does for the rest of the year when he's not, or she, it's Sarah Clark now, of course, but when Black Rod's not conducting ceremonial events, people wonder what Black Rods do. And they have many, many other functions. And I suppose if you wanted it in a word, I suppose you could describe it as, I mean, this is very, very broad brush. You could describe it as being the chief of operations. And you see there in the picture there, myself walking with John Bercow, who was Speaker at the time. David Cameron was the Prime Minister. The picture here is the peers in the House of Lords. And this is the picture that always gets published. Here are the peers in the House of Lords. And people think from these pictures that peers wear these robes every day. They don't. They're just like the House of Commons. They come in a business suit or business attire every day. So it's perfectly normal most days. But this one day is a festival dress-up day.
Yeah, but why, David, why do you knock the door 3 times?
So when Parliament was set up, we're going back in 500-600 years of history now. When Parliament was set up, one of the reasons it was set up was to start off democracy in this country, and it was to make sure that Parliament, rather than the King, exercised authority over taxation. That's how it started, and that was the reason behind it, Parliament. And the King's authority, therefore, didn't run within the House of Commons, the democratically elected chamber. And there were several rulings down the centuries which confirmed that the King had no right to, or the sovereign had no right to enter the House of Commons. But the King's messenger can. So at the State Opening of Parliament Day, Black Rod goes down as the sovereign's messenger to summon the MPs. But the MPs, in a demonstration of their political independence of the Crown, slam the door in the face of Black Rod as an exercise, as a demonstration of that independence, political independence of the Crown. And so that's why the door gets slammed. Black Rod knocks and is then admitted. You may wonder why, when before Black Rod is admitted, having knocked, there is a cry from inside the door. The Sergeant-at-Arms looks through the little window and calls out, "It is Black Rod." Ooh. And that's very important because in the 19th century, there were a couple of mishaps. Black Rod didn't go himself one day. Someone went in his place, and the House of Commons did not like that because he was not the authorised King's messenger. No. You may ask why Black Rod didn't go. The allegation is that he was drunk.
Oh, dear.
Well, heaven forbid. Well, we hope today's one isn't drunk and does turn up. David, absolutely fascinating
really
listening
enjoyed
to you.
that.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. And you'll be watching today, yeah?
I'll try and remember to switch it on, yes.
On GBNews, of course. David Leakey, thank you very much. We enjoyed that. Every day's a school day. I love to learn things like that.
Thank you very much indeed. That's David Leakey, former Black Rod.
We're turning our attention now to the Middle East.
Hey, girl, what you doing down there? Yeah, you know, no. Dancing alone every night while I live above you. Anyway, then it goes on. And I can hear your music playing. What am I leading up to?
Something about a Black Rod, I hope.
No. Oh, my darling, knock 3 times on the ceiling if you want me. Twice on the pipe if the answer is no.
Who sings that?
Tony Orlando and Dawn. Oh. I don't know if Dawn was a group or Dawn was a person.
Fit Elvis better.
Yeah, but it's appropriate.
It's a very fitting song. Yes,
knock
someone should do
times.
a little...
Has anybody ever knocked 3 times on your ceiling?
What, to tell me off for noise?
Or twice on the pipe if the answer was no. So there we go. So Black Rod knocks 3 times. Okay. Anyway, the time is 18 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock. Eamonn and Isabel here. This is Breakfast on GB News.
Yeah, and it's the 7th of November, exactly 1 month since Hamas's horrific attack on Israel. But as the nation now fights back against Hamas with their invasion of Gaza, some are asking whether the response has been disproportionate.
Well, overnight leaders of the United Nations urged, and they said enough is enough. The UN Secretary had this to say about the current situation.
Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. Hundreds of girls and boys are reportedly being killed or injured every day. More journalists have reportedly been killed over a 4-week period than in any conflict in at least 3 decades. More United Nations aid workers have been killed than in any comparable period in the history of our organization. We must act now to find a way out of this brutal, awful, agonizing dead end of destruction.
Now, that address came as the Israeli Prime Minister said Israel would consider tactical little pauses in fighting to facilitate the entry of aid and the exit of hostages.
But again, Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire despite growing international pressure.
GB News security editor Mark White is in Tel Aviv. He joins us now to tell us more. Mark, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So enough is enough? Obviously not.
Well, no, as far as Benjamin Netanyahu is concerned, he is going to stay the course. He is not going to order a ceasefire until he has, and the Israeli military has, achieved its goal of destroying Hamas, or at least degrading it to such an extent that it no longer poses a threat to Israel. And what they would say to Antonio Guterres, who is widely regarded as no friend of Israel now after his comments in recent weeks, is that although everyone, of course, wants to see an end to the conflict, those who call for a ceasefire don't then have an answer as to what you do to stop the threat of Hamas, which is its avowed aim is to destroy Israel. And just yesterday, another Hamas leader was giving a news conference in which he said there would be more 7th of October style attacks, that they won't rest until Israel is destroyed and the Palestinians have their lands back. So when dealing with that, the Israelis would argue, then the only solution is to go after Hamas and to ensure that it can offer no threat again. And on that front, Eamonn, we're told that noose around Gaza City is increasingly tightening. We haven't yet got the order for that main ground assault into Gaza City, but that will be the bloodiest battle of all. It's been horrific thus far, heading down from the northern Gaza border towards Gaza City and south of Gaza towards the coastline. We know there have been very significant civilian deaths because of the built-up nature of that area, despite the fact that residents have been told to leave there and head south for weeks now. I think in terms, though, of the pressure that Israel is feeling from the international community in terms of humanitarian pauses, it's clear that is having an effect, because what Israel has done now for the last 3 days is to allow a corridor south for 4 hours a day on the Salah ad-Din highway, that main route from northern Gaza down into southern Gaza, to be open to try to encourage people to leave the north of Gaza and head south. The difficulties they've had is they say they've come under fire from Hamas every time they've tried to do it. But it's clear, given that they are trying at least to do something, small steps, very small steps in the scheme of things. And all of the while, of course, the UN say that the humanitarian situation is unbearable in Gaza, with just a trickle of aid trucks coming across that border each day from Egypt.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. To other news now, or should we say to more political drama, because this time in America, in a courtroom, and the lead role is former President Donald Trump.
And here's what he told reporters in New York. Just a warning, this clip contains lots of flashing photography.
Because it's a scam, and this is a case that should have never been brought, and it's a case that now should be dismissed. Everybody saw what happened today. Everybody saw what happened with their star witness who admitted that. I never told him what he originally said. I did. He admitted that he lied, and he has absolutely no credibility whatsoever. That's their only witness.
Now, he was warned to avoid political speeches and just answer the questions while giving evidence in this trial, with the judge threatening to remove him from the courtroom. There were a lot of tense exchanges between the judge and President Trump's legal team.
Well, the former US president, and we should say presidential hopeful again, is accused of inflating his net worth, but he denies any wrongdoing.
Right, well, let's speak to Amy Takarian about this. Amy is a political pundit and she's a strategist. She knows everything there is to know about this. She's former chair of the Nevadan Republican Party as well. Amy, very good to see you. Thanks for talking to us this morning.
Thank you for having me. I wish I knew everything that was going on, because this circus just seems to be getting bigger and crazier by the second.
Yeah, bigger and crazier. Absolutely right. The relationship between the judge and the Trump defense team seems to be absolutely awful. But if it wasn't so serious, it would be comical, completely comical. I look at Trump, and whatever bravado he puts on, he's a man in his 70s. This has got to be really, really stressful and taking its toll on him, surely.
Well, you would think, and one would think actually after the first indictment, that you would probably take pause and probably start to unravel somewhat mentally and physically. But with each indictment, he seems to just keep plowing right along, and he gets stronger and stronger with his base, keeps fundraising off of each situation. And I think this one, though, however, is different. It is a civil case. And at this point, people need to remember that the judge has already found there to be some form of fraud. So now it's more of what are the repercussions? And that's where the stage that we're at right now. What are going to be the repercussions of what was found? And so the fact that this one deals with, even as Trump said it himself, that he didn't add into his financial worth and into his statements, the fact that his brand is what is probably, the most beneficial for all of his finances, the thing that actually has brought in the most money for he and his family is the Trump name. And so that wasn't included. And the fact that they are now looking at possibly removing any type of, further business deals and doings in New York, that's going to be devastating. It's going to be a huge blow to his ego. They're also going to try to remove any business licensing to where even his sons wouldn't be able to take it over. So now the question's going to be, where would it go if they do end up removing his business licensing? Is it going to go to Ivanka? What happens with that? Because now she takes the stand Wednesday.
She'd applied, hadn't she, to try and avoid being put in the dock, but she didn't manage to dodge that one, and she will, as you say, appear on Wednesday. And, it doesn't matter how many legal problems Donald Trump's facing. You talk about this being, all about what the penalties are, the repercussions, big money, whether he loses his licence. He's got these 3 other criminal cases, and he's already been charged in a 4th criminal case, and every time he's in trouble, he seems to do better in the polls. And I think in the swing states, like I believe Nevada is one of the swing states, he's just pulling away now from Biden and all of this.
Well, a couple things. I have a tough time believing that poll. I do think that polls can be skewed. And I think that this poll actually was released more so to push Biden to the side, maybe so then that way Democrats would finally take some serious pause and look for a plan B or a plan C. I think the fact that Biden has become quite a disappointment in many's eyes. Nobody really wants to see a redo of Biden versus Trump, but it looks like that's where we are at this point. I don't think that Trump actually is winning Nevada. And when you look at our voter registration numbers, nonpartisan and independents are actually at the top. And then you have Democrats and trailing, and third and I mean trailing, way behind nonpartisans, are the Republicans. So I have a tough time believing that Trump is actually winning in Nevada. But with that being said, I do think it's probably closer than many had anticipated. But once again, I think it's just because Biden has done such a terrible job. But there is an extreme hatred, not just a disappointment like people have with Biden, an extreme hatred by many who would be considered soft Democrats or independents and nonpartisans. Many women, Trump lost the women vote in the last election. I don't think he would be able to get that crossover that he would need actually in the general election.
So when you say there's extreme hatred, you mean these people have no respect for him?
Oh, 100%. Yes. He still goes around spewing the same damaging rhetoric, claiming that the elections were stolen, that there's voter fraud rampant. And so, when he's going around saying these things, people are questioning, well, then why are you running if the system is still the same? None of this is making sense. And they had nothing to show of it. They lost at every turn, at every time they went to a court in numerous states. They lost every single court case because they didn't have the proof that was the case. So he's really excellent at playing the victim. He's put himself in the position of being the martyr, political martyr, and rallying his base and basically putting them into his shoes and saying, if they're going to come after me, you're next if you don't reelect me. I am the only one who can save America, and you need to put me back or else.
Well, that particular allegation about the election is what he's facing in Georgia, is the one trial that could put him behind bars. All to play for. Fascinating, if not a little bit alarming to watch from over here. Thank you very much, Amy Tarkanian, for your views this morning. Political pundit and strategist joining us.
We could have talked to you all day, Amy, but we haven't got all day, so forgive us, and we say goodbye to you and our appreciation for your analysis. Thank you very much indeed.
It's just gone 6:30. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel. Here's a reminder of our top stories.
King Charles will outline the government's lawmaking plans in a speech during today's state opening of Parliament, with a general election drawing nearer.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is quickly running out of time to deliver new ideas. But what are they? We'll have full analysis right here on Breakfast.
Enough is enough. That's the heading of a letter signed by UN leaders calling for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza as Israeli airstrikes intensify.
And is it a court case or a campaign rally? We've just been hearing from Amy Tarkanian, a strategist and political commentator, for her view as a judge warned Donald Trump yesterday to end his political rants during a fraud trial into his business affairs.
Still to come, Paul Coyte in the studio with all the details on what a match last night, Spurs and Chelsea. Next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Welcome back at 6:33. Let's take a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning. And it's one of our most common cancers, but there's new hope today as almost 300,000 women are to be offered a new drug by the NHS. The drug is set to be offered to women who are deemed to have a moderate or high risk of breast cancer. And in a positive sign, trials have shown the drug reduces breast cancer cases by 49% over 11 years among those who are eligible.
Rail passengers on London's Docklands Light Railway are expecting huge disruption today. DLR riders are being warned of huge disruption to services because of a strike taking place over the next 48 hours.
It may only be early November, but you might want to get started on that Christmas shopping. Amazon workers in the UK are set to launch a series of strikes today in a long-running dispute over pay. Members of the GMB union at the online giant's Coventry site will walk out for 3 days and again on November the 24th. That is Black Friday.
Oh, which will be trouble for Amazon. I mean, they'll get paid nothing. They work far too hard. They're on schedules and timetables all day. So there you are. That's a strike, but it won't suit you. You won't like it. You won't be supporting it. Let us know your views this morning. Sport last night. Tottenham against Chelsea. Well,
have you got some honey and lemon?
The main thing is, how did Spurs get down to 9 men? That was the
right.
What's decided it, surely.
It absolutely is. So Spurs lost 4-1 to Chelsea. I mean, this is the first few minutes. There we are. There's Pochettino making his return there with Ange Postecoglou. That's the first red card there.
Right. What sort of reception did Pochettino get?
Mixed, as you might expect. Mixed, as you might expect.
If he had lost, he'd have got a good send-off.
Well, Kulusevski scores. Son has a goal ruled out offside. Sterling goal ruled out offside. Caicedo goal ruled out offside. Romero then gets sent off. There's a penalty. Palmer scores. Jackson goal. That's ruled out off offside. Van de Ven pulls a hamstring, goes off. Maddison goes off injured. And that's like the first 2 minutes of the game. It's just, no, it was crazy. That's the first half. It was just crazy.
Can you explain to people why that game is so particularly highly charged?
It's highly charged because being local rivals. Well, I say local rivals. The London rivals. Chelsea and Spurs. Spurs haven't really had a very good history against Chelsea over the last 30 years. Won last season, but generally not. And Spurs would go top of the table, 2 points clear at the top of the table, had they won yesterday. Yeah. So it's those two sendings off which made such a huge difference, because then Chelsea go down, Spurs go down to 9 men, and then it's almost impossible to play against 11. Although, the way Ange Postecoglou does it, and he said, listen, mate, this is the way we play, and this is the way we're going to stick to it. A lot of professionals are saying, look, it's really naive to play the way they did because you've got only 9 men on the pitch compared to the 11. Sit back, soak it up, but he went for it. And as a fan, it was really exciting. It may have been naive, and they scored 4 goals, but it was a heck of a game.
I think 2-1 would have been a better reflection.
I think.
The extra time goals.
Yeah, exactly. And every Chelsea goal was the same because they cut through.
My friend, Saudi Arabia, we talked about this Football World Cup going their way, and they're also, they're not going away. This sports washing business that people complain about, it's it's not. They're here to stay.
They are here
and
to
the
stay.
next sport they're hoovering up
It's tennis. It's tennis.
Think of any Saudi tennis players.
I don't think there is, and I don't think there's many Saudi golfers or Saudi
They
footballers.
just take the top attraction to their country.
Okay.
Bring them in, make the money. It's the Saudi Public Investment Fund again. They're the ones that funded Newcastle. They were in Live Golf. So now it's tennis. It was only a couple of years ago that Roger Federer had said, I won't play an exhibition over there. Now it's kind of expected. The ATP are saying that they're going to have the curtain raiser to the season, which is just about a week or so before the Australian Open starts in January. They have this, so obviously they'll build a huge stadium.
So the season's
Everybody's
longer.
And so the season will be longer, but it's all about the money. It's going to be worth hundreds of millions of pounds to the ATP Tour. So they're thinking, OK, this is just like Live Golf. There's all the money, it'll all come in. OK, let's have a tournament.
Money talks at the end of the day.
That's all it's about. It's all about
Since
the money.
we don't have any money, you have to stop talking.
OK,
right,
but I am available for
we'll
tennis.
see you again after 7. OK,
yeah, lots of stuff.
Thank you.
Stay with us. Coming up, we have Headline Makers, where we'll be discussing a war veteran who says protesters at a pro-Palestine protest beat him up.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new
It's
your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
John and Freddie are here to go through the newspapers this morning. Freddie, Just Stop Oil protesters, first of all. This awful footage that has gone viral about these two people with the hammers smashing that portrait at the National Gallery. Do we know if there's any harm to the painting? Do we know that yet?
I don't think there is. They smashed the glass, which appeared pretty tough. And it sort of shattered, as you can see in the video. It's Velázquez's Rokeby Venus, which is a wonderful painting, slashed by the suffragettes, of course, as well. And
why do people seem to target that particular picture?
Well, I can see why the suffragettes did it, because it's a picture of a naked woman, and it was sort of slightly erotic art. In a way. I could see that just about. I think targeting that on behalf of oil is rather odd, but it's also interesting that the protesters tried to identify with the suffragette movement. They said, women suffered in 1914.
Do you know, honestly, Freddie, this is where I think there's something wrong with me, because I'm looking at those two people and I think they are so affected, they're so pumped up with all of this that
well, one of them's wearing an NWA cap, which is a rap group, and so he just looks like a bit of a.
What is an NWA?
I can't say it out loud, but it was a rap group in the 80s.
Should we call them what they are? They're posh, spoilt kids who really, this is about them. This isn't about just stop oil.
But they're so
saving
intense,
the planet.
Dawn. They're so intense about everything.
Their names are Hannah and Hanan and Harrison. I mean, they're never called Wayne and Sharon, are they? I mean, they're never working-class kids, because working-class kids are out earning a living.
It's not about...
Dawn is absolutely right. Just because you're a snob, and that's why you...
I don't know anything about their backgrounds at all, but
But you can judge from that.
Everyone else seems to be judging.
If her name was Kylie, you would judge it, wouldn't you?
No,
you would.
I don't think it's relevant to the story.
Well, it's totally relevant to the story. I'm with my colleague here.
Thank you very much. And let's talk about Mary Richardson, who was the suffragette that originally attacked this painting with a machete.
Probably.
She was actually posh, yes.
Wow.
She was a Canadian.
Take away her right
But she also...
See, you're children of posh names. That's why you don't see this. It's absolutely true.
I don't think Hanan is a particularly posh name.
Any case, Isabel, Mary went on to... She's not a great example of a suffragette to follow because she went on to develop a complete crush on Oswald Mosley and become a fascist black shirt. So,
right.
So I would pick on... I think it's completely wrong they're comparing themselves to suffragettes. These people have a voice. They have a legitimate voice. The suffragettes I disagree with profoundly with a lot of the things the suffragettes did, like blowing theatres up and attacking paintings in this way. But they didn't have a voice. They had no opportunity at all to get their voice out apart from doing this. These people do.
Right. I also think there's a kind of, without wanting to be too depressing, there's a slightly broader malaise and decadence going on where increasingly people think that these actions aren't just sort of provocative, they're morally good. And you see this with protests on Palestine and so on. Being destructive, breaking things up, causing trouble, especially if you can get it to go viral, is seen as a success. And the more people are angry about it, the more you see it as a success.
Well, speaking of protests that people were very angry about, Dawn, let's talk about this story, front of the Daily Mail. And this is a poppy seller in his 70s, caught up in a pro-Palestine rally who says he was punched and kicked by a mob.
This is a chap called Jim Henderson. It was in Edinburgh's Waverley Station on Saturday. Jim is 78 and served in Northern Ireland. There were 1,200 demonstrators in the station, and you can see pictures, if you look at from the CCTV cameras in the station, of our Jim standing there on his own, surrounded by the sea of Palestinian flags. According to him, he bent down to get his collection box up because he was worried about the crowd of people there and was punched on the back. Now, there is no actual footage of this that I can work out. But the problem you've got with this, right, this is all about, obviously, the Armistice Day march that is planned in London on Saturday, coinciding with the actual 2-minute silence at 11 o'clock. And as we know, the Metropolitan Police have advised that it be called off. Suella Braverman has branded it a hate march. The irony is, right, the genuine protesters who are marching for peace, they want an armistice. So the fact that they have a right to peacefully march, I support that. We are a democracy because the people that died in the wars fought for that democracy, and that's why we all have the right to march. The timing is an issue.
Well, just to clarify, my understanding is that the organisers have said the timing will not coincide.
No, it won't.
It's going to be in the afternoon, and I think that's an important point.
Yeah, absolutely. The 2-minute silence is 11 o'clock.
I think that the time's got nothing to do with it. It's the stretching of the security forces around the place. There just is not enough police manpower or woman power to deal with this.
No, and there's been 160 arrests since these marches started. This is the 5th one due to go ahead. The officials have said the march, as you said, Isabel, starts at 12:45. It is not going down Whitehall. It's not going near the Cenotaph. And they are saying, as they have every week, to be peaceful. Now, there are always people that are agitators amongst this. There are people rent a mob, I mean, and there are always people that are determined to cause a scene. But does that stop the right for people peacefully demonstrating?
We have to differentiate in some awful way. Whatever atrocity was carried out against Israel, terrible, 1,700 people dead and whatever, the response, surely people have got to recognise now, is totally disproportionate with the, 10,000 people?
10,000, according to Hamas. Yes, of course. And, you know, there are children dying. Children have died on both sides. The question then you ask is, what were Israel meant to do? I mean, I'm not supporting either side. It's not a football match, for God's sake. You don't have to pick a side.
Biden might be confused by that, always talking about the other team.
Yeah, well,
hopefully.
exactly. But what you'd have to do is to want want to support peace and children to stop dying on both sides.
We're going to continue this important debate in the next paper round because we have to make way. We've got a government minister coming up in just a moment. We're going to take a quick break, and after that we'll be speaking to the Secretary of State for Justice, that's Alex Chalk, about the King's speech later today.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new
It's
teeth.
your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Well, a busy day for the government ahead of the state opening of Parliament as the Prime Minister uses the King's speech to outline the government's legislative agenda.
And joining us now from Westminster is the Secretary of State for Justice, Alex Chalk. A very good morning to you. And we're being told in the briefings that this is going to be a King's speech. Good morning, very much focused on law and order. I want to ask you straight away, you know, this is the sort of press release that's been sent out. We want to build on the progress that we've made as the government in keeping our streets safer. The specific case of Jordan McSweeney, who was convicted for the murder of Zara Alina, he recently had his sentence reduced. Now, you want to try and tackle these sorts of cases. Under the changes you proposed today, would he be behind bars for the full term?
So all these things are ultimately a matter for the court, which retains ultimate discretion, but it is precisely those kinds of cases that are at the heart of these measures. So we want to ensure that where a murder takes place, and it is a particularly evil murder, they're all incredibly serious, but that's to say there is sexual context or indeed sadism, that individual should expect to spend the rest of their life behind bars. Now, that's important for public protection so that they're not out in the public and can commit that offence again, but also we think that that meets the justice of the case. So yes, those who commit those most serious murders can expect for life to mean life and for them never to be released again.
What do you think, Alex, is the most significant part of the speech today?
Well, look, as you've already indicated, that criminal justice is going to be at the heart of this. So we want to ensure that public protection is a theme which runs through these measures. So we want to ensure, as I've indicated, for those most serious offenders, life means life, and also for rape offenders, that they should expect to spend the entirety of that sentence in custody. But also this, protecting the public also means reducing reoffending. So reoffending has actually come down quite considerably since 2010, but we also want to ensure that those less serious offenders, those who can be rehabilitated, are rehabilitated, because ultimately that's what protects the public as well.
I think there will be people watching this morning who'll find it a bit rich that you're trying to portray yourselves as the party of law and order, and yet we've had headlines for the last 2 days about a serial sex offender within your own ranks, and Baroness Varsi coming out and saying that there was rot at the heart of the party, that you have a problem with handling these sorts of allegations.
Well, obviously, any allegation of rape is incredibly serious, and we are absolutely clear is that if there is a complaint, then the police should be notified in the normal way. But it's because we care so deeply about this offending that's why, as I say, when we came into government in 2010, all rapists would be automatically released at the halfway mark. Halfway through their sentence, automatically released. We thought that's not right, which is why we changed the law so that it's a minimum of 2/3. But now, under these reforms, people will serve the entirety of that sentence in custody. This is a serious matter. We're prosecuting more people for rape than in 2010. They're getting longer sentences and they're spending longer in custody. So, of course, anybody who has a concern and wants to make a complaint about rape should go to the police to do it. People should be convicted, punished and disgraced for this incredibly serious crime.
Isabel pointed out there the irony of those rape allegations with someone within the party. But can't you see the irony that the Conservatives come out and they beat the drum every single year about you are the party of law and order, and you clearly are not. People feel you don't support the police. People feel you don't support the Crown Prosecution Service, the whole court system where barristers and lawyers aren't being paid a proper rate as well. The whole thing is crumbling down, yet you guys think you can come out, say what you want now, which is what you do. Nothing changes. Nothing changes. And this is pure, I suppose, just riling people up to vote for you come the election because they're going to be frightened off the alternative.
I respectfully disagree. So, on the 3 points you raised, so far as police is concerned, we have more police in this country than at any time in our history. So that was a recruitment of additional 20,000. In terms of the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, I was a barrister by background, significant investment in the CPS so that there are more rape prosecutors. And in terms of putting money into legal aid barristers, I was a legal aid barrister myself. I cared deeply about this issue. We're increasing funding by up to an additional £141 million so that there are the barristers there who do a phenomenal job up and down the country to ensure that the guilty are convicted, the innocent walk free and the public are protected. We are passionate about supporting the criminal justice system and the excellent men and women who work in it. And it's ultimately
why don't you just pay them properly then? If you're passionate about the system, pay to get the quality that you need.
But respectfully, you're absolutely right about that, and that is precisely what we're doing. So, in terms of the police, we accepted the independent pay review. In terms of barristers, who you refer to, the legal aid barristers, we are putting that additional money into the system. And just one example, and this goes back to the issue of rape. We want to ensure that rape victims can get their evidence in the can, as it were, pre-recorded under these Section 28 measures. I've increased the amount that we will pay to barristers for those very hearings so that they can be there to ensure that if they're on behalf of the Crown, they can take that witness through their evidence, and indeed they can be cross-examined as well. So we think that this is enormously important to stand up on part of victims, but also to put our money where our mouth is.
Can you explain to me the reasoning for the legislative changes to the licences for oil and gas drilling? Labour are calling it an unnecessary gimmick, and Claire Coutinho's come out in the last few days saying it's not necessarily going to help anybody with their bills. Why are you bothering with it?
So I think it's massively important that we ensure that at a time when Putin was trying to hold the world to ransom, including our country to ransom, that we should safeguard our gas supplies. Now, I believe passionately that we should get to net zero. But hang on, this is a really important point. Although we are going to all use some gas at some point. Some of your listeners watching this or viewers will themselves be using gas to get through the winter. Now, we can either bring in the gas from the United States or indeed Peru or Qatar, and that's incredibly carbon intensive because you've got to pressurise it, you've got to cool it, you've got to transport it, or we can use our domestic resource and ensure that that creates jobs and livelihoods in our country. And it just seems to make sense, and it's a bad argument to say, well, let's just go and use a whole load of carbon to ship it into Milford Haven or the Isle of Grain or wherever it is from halfway around the world.
Okay.
That's just kind of putting, that's politics as performance. It's not sensible. It's much more sensible to use your own oil and gas as we bridge to that clean future.
Alex, as we understand it, we may well be wrong, that the stuff is drilled by international companies who then sell it on the international market, and we would have to buy it back from an international market. So giving the perception that you dig a hole in the North Sea and then it goes straight into Aberdeen and it's all there for Britain doesn't seem to be correct.
Well, look, I mean, the specifics, I think it's important that, Claire will deal with those points on the Justice Secretary, as you know. But the central point is a reasonable one. The central point is a reasonable one, which is that if you are going to get gas onshore into the UK, and you make a point about it being sold elsewhere, but if you're going to get it onshore to the UK, it is much more sensible, and by the way, it is much greener to do so from closer to home rather than literally pressurising this stuff and put it on a tanker and sending it through from Qatar through the Suez Canal or even around the Cape of Good Hope.
I just want to squeeze in one last question. Yes or no answer will suffice. 7 out of 10 Conservative Party members would like to welcome Nigel Farage back into the party. Are you one of them?
This isn't a yes or no. I don't think there's any application, so I think it's an academic question, but fair question all the same.
OK.
Fair answer, Secretary of State. Thanks for your time today. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
And we'll have more for you in just a moment.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a chilly start out there for some of us, but bright skies to follow for much of the morning and into the afternoon, albeit with a fair number of showers still around through today. The coldest weather, northeast Scotland, a few mist and fog patches to clear through the morning. They will clear. And then it's another day of sunny spells and showers. The showers will be frequent and quite heavy in the west first thing. They'll tend to ease into the afternoon, whilst the odd one will pop up further east at this stage. Quite a breeze continuing as well. That's going to make it feel on the cool side, but temperatures won't stray far from the average for the time of year. 12 or 13 in the south, 10 or 11 further north. The showers do tend to fade away into the evening, although 1 or 2 will continue in the west. Clear skies then becoming prevalent, especially for eastern parts during the early hours, and as a result temperatures will fall away with once again a touch of frost possible, especially for northeast Scotland. But it's going to turn milder through the night in the west, with the wind picking up and outbreaks of rain arriving by dawn. And it is a damp start to the day away from Northern Ireland, where we see the rain move through before the sun rises. Elsewhere, it's outbreaks of rain continuing through the morning and into the afternoon. A brief spell of gusty winds and heavy rain as it all clears eastwards. And then brighter skies follow for the afternoon, but further frequent showers affecting Northern Ireland and Scotland. Some of these will turn to snow over the mountains.
A very good morning to you. It's just turned 7 o'clock. It's Tuesday, the 7th of November. You're tuned into Breakfast with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Thanks for your company. Leading the news this morning, King Charles will outline the government's lawmaking plans during today's state opening of Parliament. A general election, of course, is drawing nearer, and the Prime Minister is quickly running out of time to deliver new ideas. But what will those ideas be? We have full analysis right across the programme this morning.
Enough is enough. That's the heading of a letter signed by UN leaders calling for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. But Israeli airstrikes intensify. Mark White has the latest from Tel Aviv.
A month on from the 7th of October attacks, Israel is tightening the noose around Gaza City. Despite the death and destruction already, the real battle is still to come.
And is it a court case or a campaign rally? A judge warns Donald Trump to end his political rants during a fraud trial into his business affairs.
Because it's a scam, and this is a case that should have never been brought, and it's a case that now should be dismissed.
And Paul Coit will have all the latest in sport, however much it may hurt you this morning, Paul.
I'm finding it closure, Isabel.
Is that what your handkerchief's for?
Closure. Everything is just drifting down like that. VAR, though, I think was man of the match. I think we could say at the Spurs-Chelsea, it was a crazy game last night at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And in the World Cup, it is just not cricket, as a very strange way to get out happened for the first time ever. Yesterday.
We'll look forward to the answer to that. 7:20 this morning. Let's take a look at your weather. Aidan McGibbon with that.
And you might not want to leave the house without an umbrella today. Another very showery day across the UK. Find out where we're most likely to see those showers in the full forecast coming up soon.
And we'd love to hear from you throughout the course of the morning. Keep those emails coming in, gbviews at gbnews.com, or you can X us at gbnews.
Today is one of the most important days in our political calendar. It is the state opening of Parliament.
And today the King will conduct his first speech as monarch. But what is it we can expect?
Well, on the menu, criminal justice reform, including tougher sentences to tackle knife crime, new laws on strike action, and more oil and gas production to help reduce fuel bills.
And it's this last point that has sent Just Stop Oil off into a spin. 2 protesters were arrested after glass protecting the Rokeby Venus painting at the National Gallery in London was smashed.
Nearby, around 100 arrests were made by police as Just Stop Oil caused chaos, marching on Whitehall.
Well, let's speak to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who's at Westminster for us this morning. Good morning to you, Catherine. I don't know if you managed to catch much of our chat with Alex Chalk there. We were really pressing him on whether or not the Conservative Party can claim to be the party of law and order, given all of the sexual misconduct allegations swirling around at the moment. But that is very much the drum that they're going to be beating today.
Yes, absolutely. I've just arrived here and there's a real sense of expectation. All the roads are closed off, barriers everywhere. I had to get through, show my pass to lots of police to get through. Had to have an invitation even to be here talking to you. But yes, Rishi Sunak's big chance to set out his stall and hopefully, win the next election, or at least lose it not as badly as it currently looks like they might do. And they're going to be focusing on a couple of major issues, as you said, crime being one of them. They know that people feel very strongly about this, how it affects people's lives. So lots of measures being brought forward, including not releasing rapists earlier, including forcing convicted criminals to physically sit and be present for their sentencing, things like cracking down on knife crime, and even repeat offenders, things like burglary, like shoplifting, that they might potentially be sent to jail. And also alongside this, a big focus on energy security. We've seen them row back, haven't we, on the green targets for phasing out of petrol and diesel, for boilers, etc. They feel too that this is likely to be a vote winner. It feeds, of course, into the cost of living. So we saw the announcement yesterday, Rishi Sunak saying the government want to legislate so there will be an annual licensing of new gas and oil fields in the North Sea. They say much better, although they're committed to net zero by 2050, much better to use our own natural resources while we make this transition than bring them around from all over the world. So a couple of wedge issues with Labour. They're very keen to make a distinct offering because, let's face it, this is about legislation, sure, but this is about their attempt to get elected in a year or so's time. Rishi Sunak's first King's speech, although he's been Prime Minister for just over a year now, the last one was 18 months ago under not even the last Prime Minister, but the last Prime Minister but one, Boris Johnson. So a lot has changed since then. Of course, the big issues, cost of living, not really much on that, particularly the energy security measures. That's going to take a long time to sort of feed into bringing costs down. And also the NHS, the strike legislation, we've been hearing about it for a long time. They want to get that activated, minimum service levels of things like ambulance drivers. But of course, doctors' strikes still ongoing. So the NHS and cost of living, huge issues still. Not a massive amount to address those. And also Rishi Sunak's eventual ban on smoking for people that are 14 and younger who will ultimately never be able to buy a cigarette.
OK, with that, Catherine, thank you very much indeed. And this morning we're not just focusing on the politics of the King's speech, but also some of the quirkier traditions that it involves.
Now, one of those traditions, which stems from the reign of Charles I, is that a member of the Commons is ceremonially held hostage in Buckingham Palace. while the sovereign attends Parliament. It's all pantomime, isn't it, really?
Yes. Well, this is all to ensure the safe return of the King back in 2022. Conservative MP James Morris was that member held hostage, and I'm pleased to say he has been released and joins us this morning to tell us about it. Good morning to you, James. An hour ago, we had a really interesting interview with the former Black Rod about all of the sort of pageantry that involves. Tell us specifically about what being taken hostage on a day like today involves and why it's significant.
Well, as you say, it goes back to Charles I. I was the Vice-Chamberlain of the household, part of the Whip's office. There's a long historic relationship between the Whip's office and the royal household. So on the day, in my full mourning suit with my wand of office, I'm taken in a government car to the palace. All the roads are deserted apart from me. And I arrived there and am greeted by the Lord Chamberlain. And I'm in the car, and I have this long wand of office, which is a bit like a snooker cue. And the usher has opened the door, and this long wand is quite big, and I can't get it out of the car. I'm trying to move it and change it, and move it and change it. But then I managed to get out, and then I'm given a tour of the crown jewels, actually. Wow. Because the crown jewels, parts of the crown jewels are taken to the Lords in Rolls Royces. So part of the ceremonies, bizarrely, never thought I'd end up doing this, was to nod out the crown jewels as they're taken, and then actually when they return to nod them back in again. So I end up having a cup of tea and biscuits with the Lord Chamberlain and some senior equerries in a side room of the palace, while at that time it was actually Prince Charles, because if you remember, the Queen was too unwell to do the Queen's speech. So yeah, it's a slightly surreal experience, really, not something that I ever thought I'd do, but it was quite an honour. Fortunately, I managed to get back out of the palace, and they didn't need to keep me there or detain me further.
So, James, why you? Do you apply for this kidnapping, or are you selected, or are you just kidnapped?
No, it's tradition. As I say, it's the tradition, in the modern tradition, for the Vice-Chamberlain of the household, which was me, which is, so in the Whip's office, there's the Chief Whip, the Deputy, the Controller, and the Vice-Chamberlain, who are the senior whips. I was the Vice-Chamberlain. And part of the ceremonial role of the Vice-Chamberlain is to be the person taken hostage during the King's or Queen's speech. I also had other ceremonial role, which was I actually wrote a parliamentary note to the Queen every day. I was her 45th Vice-Chamberlain, so every day Parliament was sitting, she would get a note from me about what had actually been going on in Parliament. And it was also the role of the Vice-Chamberlain to convey messages from the Queen to the Speaker of the House of Commons. So there was a kind of, it's traditionally the Vice-Chamberlain who is the person taken hostage, with all of the associated sort of ceremony and responsibility.
I'm just playing devil's advocate because, you know, personally, I love a bit of, you know, pomp and pageantry, and I think it's what makes Britain so unique. But, you know, is there an argument that can be made that there could be a better use of time, of resources of our elected officials than grown men dressing up in silk stockings or, you know, being held hostage, you know, in some sort of pantomime? Is there an argument in the modern world that this is a bit out of date, a bit stuffy?
No, well, look, you know, these traditions around the King's speech, they're an important part of our constitutional history, and you know, I don't think people really mind it. I don't think it's a pantomime. I think it's more like the playing out of an important constitutional ceremony, which, you know, it dates, as you say, it dates back a long time. It speaks to the kind of historical continuity of our constitution, really, and is all part of that pageantry.
OK, James Morris, a Conservative MP, taken hostage during the state opening of Parliament in 2022.
Another fascinating little bit of news.
I know, it's been...
If you were to kidnap me, where would you hold me? Where would you...
I'm not sure I'd get very far in the nicest possible way. Where would you hold me if I was hostage?
Oh, I have a whole place there.
Oh, yeah, you have a whole...
It's the bottom of my garden.
Yeah, OK.
Yes, it's all...
You dream of it often. Listen, let us know your thoughts on the state opening of Parliament. We'll have full coverage here on GB News throughout the course of the day. I think it happened sort of 11 o'clock this morning. We'll have all the build-up and all the live coverage of it as well.
But it is nice to hear the tradition, that business of sending the Queen a note every day. Did he say whether the Queen wrote back to him or not?
He didn't mention that.
Yeah, but say she's away on a trip around the world. She's not going to get the notes that day. Maybe she'll have a flunky to read the note to her. I suppose that would have worked very, very well. But fascinating. There's, you think there are no jobs out there. You could apply to be the Queen's note writer.
King's Equerry is a very desirable role to hold.
To be held kidnapped. The thing that gets you, because I watch you throughout, and every time they mention they wear silk stockings,
I giggle.
Makes you giggle. Why?
I find it funny. I don't know grown men in silk stockings. It's a bit ridiculous, but
erotic.
No, more panto.
Perverted.
More panto than erotic.
More panto. But the fact that they're silk stockings, they're not just nylon stockings.
They've gone classy.
From Tesco. they're silk stockings. Have you ever worn silk stockings?
Probably not.
But I'm just thinking,
I go for the cheap ones from Tesco.
Yeah, but what silk? I can imagine what a silk scarf and whatever feels like, but it's like a different material.
Extra slinky.
Extra slinky. We're going to look at Blackrod today and whoever's kidnapped, and we're going to think they're extra slinky today. Very good.
Indeed. Look, let's turn around. Yeah.
Yes, 13 minutes past 7 o'clock. Good morning, wherever you're watching or listening from. You're very welcome.
And it is the 7th of November. It's exactly 1 month now since Hamas's horrific attack on Israel. But as Israel fights back against Hamas with their invasion of Gaza, some are now asking whether the response has been disproportionate.
Overnight, leaders of the United Nations said enough is enough. UN Secretary had this to say about the current situation.
Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. Hundreds of girls and boys are reportedly being killed or injured every day. More journalists have reportedly been killed over a 4-week period than in any conflict in at least 3 decades. More United Nations aid workers have been killed than in any comparable period in the history of our organization. We must act now to find a way out of this brutal, awful, agonizing dead end of destruction.
This comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that Israel will consider tactical little pauses in Gaza to facilitate the entry of aid or the exit of hostages.
But again, Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire despite growing international pressure.
GB News security editor Mark White is in Tel Aviv and joins us now. Mark, surely it has got to the stage where the response now, even the most fervent supporter of Israel would be saying this is disproportionate. We're talking about, what, 10,000 deaths?
Yes, Israel would say, though, that those deaths are not as a result of Israel directly targeting civilians, but as a result of Hamas cynically using the civilian population as human shields. And they also argue that, those who call for a ceasefire now have not offered anything in the way of a solution as to what Israel does to deal with the Hamas issue. And the Hamas issue, as stated again by a senior Hamas official just yesterday at a news conference, is to destroy Israel, is to continue to launch 7th of October style attacks. So that's why Israel say that they are undeterred from their goal of continuing to move forward to either destroy Hamas or at least degrade it to the point where it no longer poses a threat to Israel. And I thought, Eamonn, one of the more interesting comments made by Benjamin Netanyahu last night in an interview with ABC News in America was his statement that Israel will maintain overall security responsibility for Gaza once this conflict is over. In other words, they are going to reoccupy Gaza. And that has all kinds of problems in itself, because you have remnants of Hamas, no doubt, still in Gaza after this conflict formally ends, and you've got a radicalised population after what has happened in recent weeks. So they are going to occupy Gaza but still be faced with what will be a low-level insurgency going forward there. So it's not going to be peace, or the peace that Israel wants, but I guess it's the lesser of two evils as far as Israel is concerned in trying to protect the overall safety of the civilian population in Israel.
Thanks, Mark. The time now is 17 minutes past 7 o'clock. Let's have a look at some other stories coming into the newsroom.
Almost 300,000 women who are deemed to have a moderate or high risk of breast cancer are set to be offered a new drug by the NHS. Scientists have found that as well as treating breast cancer, the drug anastrozole, a hormone therapy, also can prevent cases. In a positive sign, trials have shown the drug reduces breast cancer cases by 49% over 11 years among eligible women.
Rail passengers on the London Docklands Light Railway are expecting huge disruption today. They're being warned of severe delays, and the strike takes place over the next 48 hours.
And Amazon workers in the UK are set to launch a series of strikes in a long-running dispute over pay. Members of the GMB union at the online giant's Coventry site will walk out today for 3 days, and again on November the 24th, which is Black Friday.
Right. Here's a headline in The Sun today, and it says, Eco Harry flies to Katy Perry gig in a tycoon's jet. So they live in California. Katy Perry's in Las Vegas. She's performing there somewhere or other. And I don't mind. I honestly couldn't care less if Prince Harry and Meghan Markle board a private jet. Couldn't care less. It is an amazing way to travel. Good luck to them if they can avail of that. What I do object to, and I'm sure what everybody else objects to, is the hypocrisy associated with this, where they preach to everyone else about you shouldn't do this, and they act all meek and mild about this sort of stuff, whatever, and yet they do it behind everybody's back.
Don't do as I do, do as I say.
Do as what I say. And, you know, so they went to the concert for a night out. What a night out this would have been. So they board the concert. Incidentally, the jet's owned by an oil tycoon. So they fly to the concert, they watch the concert, and then they go back on the jet again. That's a good night out.
Meanwhile, Prince William flies to Singapore in a commercial flight. Very humble of him, and much lower carbon emissions than in a private jet, which is a sign.
My point is, you have to be practical. I mean, he's not going to row a boat to Singapore, you know, he's not going to cycle.
No, but I mean, days
there.
gone by, they'd have gone in their own aircraft. But he's trying to, you know, be a bit more mindful and go in a commercial flight.
But the thing is, you got to get there, right? So stop preaching about it or just walk everywhere. It is putrid, really, that, you know, as you say, it's not do what I do what I say type thing. And then people are stupid enough to listen to them. OK, 20 past 7.
And we're going to get an update on your forecast now. Here's Aidan.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a chilly start out there for some of us, but bright skies to follow for much of the morning and into the afternoon, albeit with a fair number of showers still around through today. The coldest weather, northeast Scotland, a few mist and fog patches to clear through the morning. They will clear. And then it's another day of sunny spells and showers. The showers will be frequent and quite heavy in the west first thing. They'll tend to ease into the afternoon, whilst the odd one will pop up further east at this stage. Quite a breeze continuing as well. That's going to make it feel on the cool side, but temperatures won't stray far from the average for the time of year. 12 or 13 in the south, 10 or 11 further north. The showers do tend to fade away into the evening, although 1 or 2 will continue in the west. Clear skies then becoming prevalent, especially for eastern parts during the early hours, and as a result temperatures will fall away with, once again, a touch of frost possible, especially for northeast Scotland. But it's going to turn milder through the night in the west, with the wind picking up and outbreaks of rain arriving by dawn. And it is a damp start to the day, away from Northern Ireland, where we see the rain move through before the sun rises. Elsewhere, it's outbreaks of rain continuing through the morning and into the afternoon. A brief spell of gusty winds and heavy rain as it all clears eastwards. And then brighter skies follow for the afternoon, but further frequent showers affecting Northern Ireland and Scotland. Some of these will turn to snow over the mountains.
Sean is amongst the many people who've got in touch over the past 2 days, talking about the new GB mugs. I haven't known what.
Skinny bottoms.
Oh,
wide tops.
And do you like that?
I'm not bothered. Happy, I'll take my... To be honest, I have smaller volume in there than before, so probably I prefer not.
And we sell these, don't we?
I don't know, pass. We used to sell the old ones. Why are you asking me all these difficult questions?
Well, I thought you would be...
I don't know.
top
I
of
know that
everything.
these are only for us.
Yes, and people, you sit on breakfast shows and people do all this as if they're warming
I
and
do. I
comforted.
hug my coffee and my hot water and my tea all morning.
All the ones
Lots
who are
of people moan
false.
about it, but I do it
All the
for
ones who are
real.
false, like me. And
There's nothing hot in your cup.
nothing hot in my cup, but don't tell people what's in my cup.
I won't.
Yeah.
It's
They'll have to
vodka.
This doesn't mix well with my medication, I have to
Explains
say.
a lot.
It explains an awful lot. Anyway, what are we
Suella, or Sula even.
Oh, is that Suella Braverman? No?
Sula says, I love Eamonn singing. More singing Eamonn. We need more vodka first.
Yes.
Here we go.
The more I drink there, the more I'm likely to sing. But we were singing, knock 3 times on the ceiling if you want me, twice on the pipe if the answer is no. And the reason we're doing that is old Black Rod...
In his silk stockings,
in his
no
silk
less.
stockings, and he'll go and knock that door 3 times today. Wouldn't it be great if someone says, no, you can't come in, end off, don't let him in, bolt the door and that's it.
Well, gets questions
Very
about whether or not Nigel Farage should be allowed back into the Conservative Party. We'll be debating that next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
The jungle. He's a Brexiteer.
Get him in there!
Yeah. Well, from questions about whether Nigel Farage could be heading into the jungle, a now new poll from Conservative Holmes has revealed 7 in 10 Tory members say they want him in the party.
Oh, right. Some people might describe the party as a jungle. Today, we're asking, should Nigel Farage be admitted back into the Conservative Party? Earlier, we asked the Secretary of State for Justice, Alex Chalk. This is what he had to say.
This isn't a yes or no. I don't think there's any application, so I think it's an academic question, but fair question all the same.
Classic lawyer.
Well, let's now ask Albie Eamonn about this, GB News contributor and co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism. Albie, where do you stand on this?
No, I'll give a very clear answer. The answer is no. I've got a lot of time for Nigel. Of course, he's a much-loved colleague, and I would like him to go on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. But this is someone who has campaigned against the Conservative Party for the last 30 years. He's openly said that the Conservative Party should lose the next general election. And when I'm out on the doorstep with other activists campaigning for our brilliant candidates, I want to think that everyone that's in our party wants to campaign for our brilliant candidates. And Nigel Farage has made it clear that he does not want to do that.
And yet, I think back to the Conservative Party conference this year, and for me, the abiding images that I think of when I think of Tory conference was Priti Patel and Nigel Farage dancing on the dance floor at the GB News party. Everybody cozying up to him. First time he's been allowed back in, I think, to the conference. Certainly seems as though he's popular.
So he was allowed into the conference. I believe it was on a media pass. It would have been the pass that a lot of our other members of staff would have been on. So that's not something which is strange at all. And he's always been a popular figure within the Conservative Party. It's, of course, why David Cameron called the Brexit referendum in 2016. That does not mean, however, that someone who has campaigned against the Conservative Party for the last 30 years and openly wants the Conservative Party to lose the next general election should be allowed into our party. And I think it's pretty weak that figures in our party can't just simply say what I have said. It's a perfectly logical argument. People that campaign against the Conservative Party should not be allowed in the Conservative Party, and I would love it if our ministers and Conservative leaders would have the balls to say that.
OK, well, here's what you've got in place of what you were pointing out there. Keir Starmer sums up the Conservatives like this. The choice facing the country is between a changed Labour Party, hungry to change the country through an exciting programme of long-term reform, and a Tory party with only gimmicks, division and more of the same. How far wrong is he?
I mean, he's completely wrong. I don't think the Prime Minister delaying our net zero commitments to help people through the cost of living crisis is a gimmick. I do not think the Prime Minister's 5 pledges or the Rwanda plan is a gimmick. We've just heard this morning that Italy has signed a deal with Albania, a similar Rwanda-style migrant deal with Albania to deal with their migrant problem. So Britain is leading the way on these issues. We've just got to get it past the courts and actually get the policy off the ground. These aren't gimmicks. Maybe if Keir Starmer spent more time actually voting with the government who's trying to solve the people's problems instead of hindering us at every opportunity, the Conservatives would actually be able to do what the people want to do. But it just seems that people like Keir Starmer want to stifle things.
Well, let's bring in David Mellor. He's former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, regular on the programme. And David, you would actually like to see Nigel Farage rejoining the Conservative Party. Tell us why. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the first thing is Nigel Farage is a major political figure. And if Nigel Farage is campaigning for the Conservatives, that would be much better than Nigel Farage campaigning against the Conservatives, because we know what he can do. And as someone once said in a different political crisis, it's better to have that blank inside the tent peeing out than outside the tent peeing in.
Crikey, what an analogy. Do you think it's possible, Albie, that, yes, he might have campaigned against the Tories for many decades now, but that the party's actually moved to the right as the left have moved to the centre, and that actually it's a different party that he used to campaign against?
No, I don't think that's true at all. Look, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to agree with David that Nigel Farage should be campaigning within the Conservative Party. As I mentioned before, I have a lot of time for Nigel, but we've got to remember that he was not chosen to lead the official Vote Leave campaign because he was seen to be too divisive. This is not just a person who is divisive with the general public, although he might be much loved by our viewers. He's actually also very divisive within the Conservative Party, and there may well be lots of people on the other part of the Conservative Party to David, perhaps the One Nation wing of the party, which, let's remember, actually has the most MPs in the Conservative Party, who would be dead against Nigel rejoining the Conservative Party and having a leadership position. So we've also got to think about this on a matter of party unity. I do not necessarily think that Nigel is the uniting figure that many people perhaps on the party's right think that he is.
Final question, David. The jungle. Not asking if you're going into it, but what would Nigel Farage's chances, if he goes in, of winning, being king of the jungle?
The thing about Nigel Farage is he will add to the number of Conservative votes. The problem is with today's Conservative Party, there simply aren't enough people who can actually appeal to the mass of voters. You know, it's they just don't cut the mustard. And yeah, it's delightful to have the conversation we're having with our friend here. But how many votes is he going to add? Yeah, he isn't. And the answer is no one's heard of him. Okay. Not even a household name in his own front room. And I think what we have to be aware of is that Nigel Farage is a big person, and the Conservative Party needs something to rescue them. And at the moment, the Conservative Party look doomed.
What we don't need, David, is personal ad hominems. We had a big person leading the Conservative Party, Boris Johnson. That was a complete disaster. What we don't need is personal ad hominems. There are perfectly reasonable, talented people within the Conservative Party who can appeal. People like Kenny Badenoch, people like Penny.
Gotta leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed, David Miller and Albie Eamonn. Thank you both very much indeed. Nigel Farage, should he be readmitted to the Conservative Party? Give us your view.
Do you know whose view I want to ask on all of this? Pat McFadden, actually. He is joining us. He's the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. No, he's very busy. He's a very busy man. Good morning to you, Mr McFadden. I wonder, and please, I know it's hard for politicians, but I genuinely want a completely honest answer to this. Would the Conservative Party be more of an electoral threat to Labour with or without Nigel Farage?
The genuinely honest answer to that is that this debate that you're having there shows that the chaos is just going to continue. Whether it's around Nigel Farage or Suella Braverman or the Liz Truss supporters or the Boris Johnson supporters or somebody, they don't really believe in Rishi Sunak.
You're dodging the question.
He has the appearance of this sort of caretaker who's sitting on top of all this. So, to be honest, for me, it's irrelevant who's involved in the chaos. What I'm more concerned with is stopping it. Okay. And the Tory party can't stop it by itself, as the debate you've just had shows.
Pat, when today, I presume, Pat, you're in the Commons today for the King's speech, yeah?
I will be, yes. Yeah, I will be.
How irritating will it be for you to sit and listen to what the King has to say on behalf of the government?
Well, it's part of our constitution. I'm not irritated at the King. It's the monarch's duty, the monarch's role, you might say the monarch's burden, to have to read out the legislative programme for the government of the day. So I don't find that irritating. But what I am frustrated by is that it seems so empty and the country's challenges are so big. And at the Conservative Party conference a few weeks ago, the Prime Minister said it's time for a change. And the answer to that call for change is 5 more years of the people who messed it up in the first place. Now, I half agree with the Prime Minister. It is time for a change. The country does need change. But as today's legislative programme will show, you're not going to get that change with more of the Conservatives. You're just going to get more of the same. And I suspect when your viewers see the content, if it's anything like what's been trailed in the newspapers, they're going to be saying, is that it? And it's a pretty fair verdict.
Although, you know, you say you believe in change, but actually one of the reasons lots of commentators are saying that the Conservative Party are going so big on these new oil and gas licences is to try and really offer something completely different from Labour. This all following on from the Uxbridge by-election, which they sort of had a surprise win all over the issue of ULEZ, and we are expecting more pro-motorist measures. Other than that, I mean, would it look that different from a Labour King's Speech? You talk about change, but, you know, what different really would you be offering?
Well, if we were doing this today, the kind of things that we'd be offering would be 700,000 more dental appointments in areas of greatest need, a real issue for many of your viewers, 2 million more NHS procedures to get the waiting list down, 1.5 million more houses over the course of the next Parliament. Not just houses, but the things that you need alongside houses, new schools, GP surgeries, the local businesses that make up a community, and a 5-point plan to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour in our town centres. That's the kind of thing we'd be promising. That comes on top of existing promises we had on setting up GB Energy to manage the energy transition that we need, and a better, fairer deal for people in the workplace. There is real change on offer, but you're not going to get it from the Conservative Party. You're only going to get it from the Labour Party.
Well, there you are. That's the alternative King's Speech today from Pat McFadden. Pat's the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and he's National Campaign Coordinator for the Labour Party. Appreciate your views, Pat. We've got to leave it there. Thank you.
Still to come, it reads like satire, but a German nursery is actually set to ditch its name. It was in honour of Anne Frank, and now they're doing it all in the name of diversity. Find out the details next.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Right, let's go through what's making the headlines today. Don Neeson and Freddie Gray with their views on those things. There's a video. Let's have a look at this, and this is on Twitter. It was tweeted out by the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, and so apparently you can be abused going into McDonald's. They can let mice out and whatever. But Don, what are we seeing here?
This is Kentucky Fried Chicken or KFC, and they are chanting Palestinian peace protest, chanting quite aggressively and sticking posters up about the children that have been killed in Palestine. I'm not quite sure what KFC have done. I know the McDonald's link is the fact that McDonald's in Israel, which are franchises, remember, are giving discounted meals out to the IDF fighters. So I get why McDonald's. I'm not quite sure what KFC have done to deserve this. But my issue with the video that shocked me was a little boy coming out of McDonald's. I think it was the other day. Little boy with his mum coming out of McDonald's, clutching his little box, and there were a group of grown people screaming abuse at him. Shame on you.
You see, I can get it if you're screaming abuse because of the constitution of the food or something like that, you know, which should be well served. But as for whatever political intention there was from KFC or McDonald's?
Well, I think it's some vague, and all these things are completely illogical. Every story we're talking about this morning seems to be illogical, whether it's the Rockaby Venus, whether it's the poppies. Everything is, reason is breaking down. I suppose there might be some tenuous thought that Kentucky is America, we hate America because America backs Israel, something like that. But there's also this curious element. Have you heard about the mice?
Yeah, we talked about it on this programme.
Releasing the mice.
Coordinated and quite difficult to come up with those numbers of mice.
And I think, given some of the rumours not proven about KFC, I think the staff might think, oh, there we go, there's another bargain bucket.
Check your bargain bucket.
In all seriousness, though, where is this all going? The division, you know, the Arab world on one side, the West apparently on the other side, and yet now we hear from the Palestinian Health Ministry, obviously backed by Hamas or run by Hamas, saying 10,000 civilian deaths. All that is creating is the whole next generation of people who are fueled with hatred. The situation is only going to get worse, and I do despair.
Well, and Netanyahu saying last night that they might occupy Gaza City for an unspecified period of time. That is going to be an extremely dangerous situation. There are no good outcomes at the moment. I really don't think there are.
We were talking about this during the break because you had a meeting with some Qataris yesterday, and some of the Hamas leaders are in Qatar, aren't they? And it's like, well, what is the end game? Nobody seems to know what the end game actually is.
It seems impossible to even dream of a two-state solution when both sides want to wipe each other out. And yet a two-state solution, I personally, from my limited amount of knowledge, think it seems to be the only way of resolving this.
Well, and the pressure will have to come from Egypt, Jordan, the Gulf states around will have to do something themselves to relieve the situation. And Egypt's been very unwilling.
Yeah, and Jordan, I was just reading tweets that the King, Abdullah, was putting out yesterday, giving their unswerving, unrelenting support to Palestine. So they have a clear position in this. And you know,
Well, they have to because, I mean, they are largely Palestinians. In Jordan, and then Egypt is worried because they don't want to have to go through what Jordan had to go through and have to take in an enormous number of very poor refugees.
I think the confusion here as well, it's still the confusion, even though we are a month on from the original attack, is confusion Palestine with Hamas. I mean, Hamas are terrorists. They're the ones that went into Israel and did that. And the fact that so many Palestinian civilians, especially the children and the babies, are dying.
Well, the Israelis have been saying, and it's a fair point, you know, repeatedly, we are not targeting civilians, but we cannot destroy these terrorists who committed these horrific atrocities without hurting civilians because they are hiding amongst them, and it is an impossible.
Well, it isn't impossible. It's not impossible. What's the word? The extraneous casualties that are coming into this surely is totally unacceptable. They're just killing people. They say they're not targeting civilians. They couldn't do worse if they did target civilians. They couldn't kill any more than they actually are at the moment. So I mean, we accept that. We go, oh well, they're not targeting civilians. 10,000 civilians have been killed.
Well, we do have, that is from Hamas, that claim, which we do have to take with a pinch of salt because they are unreliable. I'm not saying that. I mean, both sides
thousands. It's easy to see.
No, of course, it's a massive,
yes.
but it's very hard to conduct this operation. You know, I'm not
Special forces.
Special forces going into those tunnels could get extremely violent very, very quickly.
Well, also the hostages are in the tunnels, so you know that's the big fear there.
People keep forgetting they're still.
So what? You just drop a bomb and you can kill, 1,000
no,
children?
I'm not saying that. That's the last thing I'm saying. But I don't think there is an easy answer. And I think it has to be. And I do think Netanyahu showed a chink of light, a bit of hope when he said that there could be very little pauses.
Yes.
Antonio Guterres yesterday saying that the parties to the conflict, both parties and indeed the international community, face an immediate and fundamental responsibility to stop this inhuman collective suffering and dramatically expand humanitarian aid to Gaza. And he's spot on with that, I think.
He is spot on, but the trouble is they're totally toothless, aren't they? The UN, I mean, they can't do anything. They can come out with these statements and everyone goes, yeah, that's so right, but then what happens?
Yeah, and you move civilians around. Hamas hide under the skirts of these people. And, what changes? Who knows? This situation, Freddie, a nursery school in Germany. Now, this is the sort of thing that really disturbs me. The home of Anne Frank. I've been there. Anybody else been there?
Yeah, in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
I've never been.
But anyway, this is the Anne Frank nursery. Tell us more, Freddie, or it won't be for much longer.
If you'd said to me 10 years ago that an Anne Frank nursery would be renamed on diversity grounds 10 years ago, I would not have believed you. But now, again, completely illogically, it has been. Because it's going to be renamed as the World Explorer Kindergarten, a more benign name. But who would possibly be, unless you really hate Jewish people and think that they should be killed, who would possibly object to a nursery being named after Anne Frank, who is this, heroic figure?
I read that some people were saying people didn't know who Anne Frank was and that they thought it was sort of obscure.
Well, I mean, it's a kindergarten, great place to learn.
Great, exactly. Yeah. Fair point.
Exactly, yeah. It's just, I mean, as Eamonn said, I mean, if you go to Anne Frank's house, remember she was in hiding there with her family from the Nazis during the Second World War and was eventually killed in one of the concentration camps. But if you go to that house and you go to the rooms that Anne and her family lived in, it's utterly chilling.
They're completely bare.
What people had to go through, and you try and walk across the floor because they had to be so quiet because there was people underneath that would have grasped them up to the Nazis, basically. And you try and walk across the floor on the top floor, Isabel, being so quiet, and they had to live like that for months.
Yeah, yeah.
It was all for nothing.
I was lucky enough to film in it, and the house was closed down so that we could film it. So we were the only people inside it. It's very, very tiny.
She was a child. We're talking about the deaths of children now.
Very clever, wonderful book. I thoroughly enjoyed reading her diary.
What do you make of Donald Trump and the whole situation in the USA and the theatre? And Freddie, I don't... he's a man in his 70s. It must be really stressful, this, no matter what advantage he's taking off it.
Well, that's a key question. Does this strain break him? Because the strain of running for president is just about the most stressful thing you can do. And then he's got countless legal cases going on against him. Does he buckle on a strain? And there have been some signs that he is
I
sounding
would
quite
say he
fatigued.
looks as strong as an ox.
Some of his, I mean, he's always strange in the way he talks, but there have been a couple of indications, and always you have to take into account it's been.
I've noticed.
But then, yeah, well, you know, voters look at that, and then they set him against Joe Biden, who clearly can't really talk or walk, and he's not doing very well, and so I think voters are very torn there when they look at that. And I mean, as far as the legal trials are concerned, I think it's all mostly sound and fury signifying nothing, particularly this case against the Trump family. Yes, it will annoy the Trumps. It'll hurt them financially. It's going to make no difference against him politically. The only difference it will make is for him, because people can see that it's a political trial. The judge kept on saying this is not a political campaign.
If you can't control your client, I will.
But yes, exactly. Good luck with that. Is the only
The more
answer to
legal
that.
case he has against him, the more popular he becomes.
But only surely with this particular wing. Tell me more, because I always find this really hard to square, because I think of Republicans, I think of, you know, law and order, people who are often church-abiding, seeing the disrespect to a judge, and I know that the system's more politicised than in the UK, you know, that's, you know, surely not a Conservative leader there.
I think it fires up the Trump base, that's for sure, in support of Trump. But I do think there's evidence in the polls that independents think this is a show trial. This is all farce. And what voters really care about is, did they feel better off under Donald Trump or Joe Biden? And at the moment, even though the Biden administration will tell you that the US economy is very strong, voters felt that they were doing better financially under Trump, and that's why he's doing better in the polls.
Freddie, tell me this. Is it a given that it's going to be Joe Biden?
No. I mean,
Blinken, he's rather statesman-like on
He's
the old...
actually doing not too bad a job, is he?
stage.
I mean, he visited Israel, and then the next day there are murmurs about, well, maybe we will allow some sort of break in the fighting. So.
Well, I think, I mean, Obama's intervention at the weekend was quite interesting.
On his anniversary, 15
not
years?
helping Biden at all, pushing Biden in a difficult position over the Middle East. David Axelrod, Obama's former advisor, came out over the weekend and said, you know, maybe Joe needs to think about whether he's helping us. So, yes, there's always been these sort of... Ever since Biden became president, there's been these rumours that the Democrats aren't comfortable with him. They're going to mount some sort of coup against him. But ultimately, if Biden doesn't want to step down and isn't forced to step down through ill health, it's hard to see how they get rid of him.
The opinion polls aren't for him, though, are they? Going very...
No, but Trump wins. As things stand, Trump wins.
Gosh.
Yeah, and the head of hair cunts, which Trump's got a lot of. And Anthony Blinken, he's got a great head of hair as well. And I tell you, in America, they don't like bald people. I hope you like the weather. It's true.
Is he Aidan McGivern?
Why you tell me who on American TV hasn't got hair?
Bruce Willis. Here's Aidan McGivern.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a chilly start out there for some of us, but bright skies to follow for much of the morning and into the afternoon, albeit with a fair number of showers still around through today. The coldest weather, northeast Scotland, a few mist and fog patches to clear through the morning. They will clear. And then it's another day of sunny spells and showers. The showers will be frequent and quite heavy in the west first thing. They'll tend to ease into the afternoon, whilst the odd one will pop up further east at this stage. Quite a breeze continuing as well. That's going to make it feel on the cool side, but temperatures won't stray far from the average for the time of year. 12 or 13 in the south, 10 or 11 further north. The showers do tend to fade away into the evening, although 1 or 2 will continue in the west. Clear skies then becoming prevalent, especially for eastern parts during the early hours, and as a result temperatures will fall away with once again a touch of frost possible, especially for northeast Scotland. But it's going to turn milder through the night in the west, with the wind picking up and outbreaks of rain arriving by dawn. And it is a damp start to the day away from Northern Ireland, where we see the rain move through before the sun rises. Elsewhere, it's outbreaks of rain continuing through the morning and into the afternoon. A brief spell of gusty winds and heavy rain as it all clears eastwards. And then brighter skies follow for the afternoon, but further frequent showers affecting Northern Ireland and Scotland. Some of these will turn to snow over the mountains.
Still to come. It's a day of pomp and ceremony at Westminster ahead of the state opening of Parliament. We are previewing everything that's happening next.
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello there, very good morning to you. The time approaching 8 o'clock on this Tuesday morning, the 7th of November. You're listening and watching Breakfast with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
And here's what's leading the news this morning. King Charles will outline the government's lawmaking plans in a speech during today's state opening of Parliament, with the general election drawing closer.
The Prime Minister's quickly running out of time to deliver new ideas, but what will they be? We have full analysis here throughout the programme.
Enough is enough. That's the heading of a letter signed by UN leaders calling for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. But Israeli airstrikes intensify. Mark White has the latest from Tel Aviv.
A month on from the 7th of October attacks, Israel is tightening the noose around Gaza City. Despite the death and destruction already, the real battle has still to come.
In the USA, is it a court case or a campaign rally? A judge warns Donald Trump to end his political rants during a fraud trial into his business affairs.
Because it's a scam, and this is a case that should have never been brought, and it's a case that now should be dismissed.
And Paul Coit will be here with all the latest in the world of sport.
Well, last night, 5 goals. There were 5 disallowed. There were 2 red cards. There were 2 bad injuries. There was the partridge in the pear tree. And Spurs lose 4-1 at home to Chelsea. And former Spurs captain Gary Mabbott will be with us a little later.
But besides all that, was it a good game?
I can't remember.
You've got a hoarse throat this morning.
It was, you know what? It was a ding-dong. It was a hell of a ding-dong. It was a great game of football. Very exciting.
Do you know, Harry Kane has scored so many hat-tricks now in Germany, which is fine. When you score a hat-trick, as the guy did last night for Chelsea, and you get the ball, you get the match ball.
That's right.
But Harry lives in a hotel room. What's he doing with his balls?
He's tripping over them everywhere he goes, I think is the answer. Yeah, because they're all over the place. Yeah.
Wonder if someone store them for him.
Do you think so? Do you reckon he keeps everyone? Because they always get them signed and then they get a little stand for them. But I think probably the hotel room, if it was me walking up, tripping over, they're all over the place.
What's German for hat-trick? That's what I want to know.
You what?
What's the German for hat-trick? Come back to me with that.
Des Hattentricken.
Is it really?
Yes,
Des
Hattentricken.
An infidel.
There you go.
Wayne Rooney, but I was looking at what he keeps in terms of souvenirs and things in the Colleen documentary. He's done it very tastefully, very well. There's that, you know, when he did the strike against City, and he stands, my arms are too stiff to go.
Nearly red card for you against Isabel.
But he can do all, you know, do that.
Yeah.
I stand like that at home.
Yeah.
I come home at the end of the day, and I come through the door like that.
Shirtless.
The Messiah complex.
And then I feel this tongue licking me.
Yeah.
And it's only the dog.
Oh, is it really?
It's only the dog.
Yeah, but everything's cleared up, though, with the dog now, is it?
That's it.
She's all right now, is she?
It is. Right. Ian McGivern, looking ahead to the weather.
And you might not want to leave the house without an umbrella today. Another very showery day across the UK. Find out where we're most likely to see those showers in the full forecast coming up soon.
It's the big day, and we have the big build-up in just over an hour's time, the pomp, the ceremony. It's the state opening of Parliament, and the centrepiece will be the King's speech.
Yeah, not the movie, the real thing. His Majesty's ceremonial address, it will be his first as monarch, will detail the legislation that Rishi Sunak will be keen to push through before the next general election, which is expected to be next year.
OK, full and continuous coverage from 9:30 a.m. here on this very channel. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, is in Westminster.
Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, is at Buckingham Palace.
And Lisa Hartle is across Republican protesters wanting to make their voices heard.
So first, let's cross to Christopher. Good morning to you. What can we expect sort of from the political side of things in today's King's speech?
OK, this is a chance here for Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, to finally set out his stall as Prime Minister. The first King's speech in 70 years. His first as Prime Minister, maybe his first and last one, with a general election next year and the polls looking really dreadful for the Tory party. The last one was back in May 2022. The Prince of Wales, now King Charles, opened it in place of his mother. Of course, Boris Johnson was Prime Minister then. So much has happened since then. And that's why it's so important, I think, for this Tory government to set its own agenda. They're laying traps for the Labour Party in this document we'll be seeing about 11:30 when the King reads it out. In there is a lot on criminal justice. They think that they can try and highlight the rather good record the government's had on cutting crime, apart from areas like shoplifting, but otherwise crime has fallen over the past few years, and that's a bit of a win for the Tory government. They feel they can press home that advantage, particularly as Sir Keir Starmer used to be in charge of prosecutions. They feel they can expose a record he may have when he was doing that job. Other areas too, of course, we were in North Norfolk yesterday. We heard the Prime Minister unveil plans to allow for these annual letting of oil and gas licences. Quite what the King thinks of that, of course, he's giving the speech in COP 2028 on the 1st of December. Whether he feels this is what the government should be doing, we don't know. But generally, we are going to see an attempt here by the PM, Rishi Sunak, to set out his agenda, his way he thinks he can differentiate what he wants to do from government with what Labour might do if they win the next general election.
OK, Chris, thanks very much indeed for that. Let's cross to Cameron Walker. He joins us from Buckingham Palace. Gosh, catching the sun this morning. Absolutely stunning view behind you, Cameron. Hearing the political side and all the pomp and pageantry that we'll see in Westminster is fascinating, but so much of it around the royal family with the crown jewels themselves travelling in their own vehicle from Buckingham Palace this morning. Tell us more.
Oh, absolutely, Isabel. It was 2016. That was the last time that Queen Elizabeth II wore the imperial state crown to a state opening of Parliament. And King Charles III, for the first time as monarch, will be wearing the imperial state crown for the state opening of Parliament. Later on this morning, he will depart Buckingham Palace in the Diamond State Coach, escorted by a number of armed services, including 124 horses providing the sovereign's escort, and his sister as well. As Colonel of the Blues and Royals, Princess Anne is taking up her position once again as golden stick in waiting, similar to the King's bodyguard. She took on that position during the King's and Queen's coronation back in May. As for the coronation, yet another nod to that. Queen Camilla, she is going to be re-wearing her coronation dress that she wore on the 6th of May to accompany His Majesty the King to the state opening of Parliament in the Palace of Westminster. She'll also be having a bit of a nod to Queen Elizabeth II by wearing her George IV state diadem for the first time. Now, that's that famous crown that Queen Elizabeth II wore to her own coronation, and what became famous perhaps for being pictured on stamps and banknotes. So lots of pomp and pageantry to look forward to, all kicking off later.
And you look after yourself, Cameron, because they'll kidnap somebody today. I don't mean any terrorists or whatever, but apparently it's all part of the game today. They kidnap somebody and anyway, you'll know better than I do. Protests, a big concern for police. And we're not just talking about pro-Palestinian marches, but anti-royal campaigners. Lisa Hartle will tell us more on that one. Morning, Lisa.
Good morning. Well, yes, one group that definitely won't be cheering on the King today is the campaign group Republic. They're expecting about 500 people to be protesting here. You may have seen them. They're well known for the placards that they have and the banners carrying the slogan, "Not My King." Well, joining me now is the CEO of Republic, Graham Smith. Thank you for joining us this morning. Graham, so you want to see the removal of the monarchy and the House of Lords?
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, being here today is really opposing the monarchy, of course, but this is an advert for how bad our constitution is. A king and the crown sitting in the unelected lords. The whole lot should be swept away. We need a properly democratic parliament with an elected head of state.
Well, what do you think hasn't been working so far?
Well, I think that, the vast majority of people are dissatisfied with our political system, and the reasons for that are very much attached to the crown and the powers it gives the government, the lack of an elected upper house, and this is a pantomime today that reminds us of how bad that political system really is.
Well, some people would say people come here from all over the world to see the Buckingham Palace, the royal family. This is so ingrained in our history. What would you say to that?
Well, our history's not going anywhere. The palace isn't going anywhere, but people don't come here to see Charles. You won't get many people here today as tourists wanting to see this going on. So, we will be fine. Our tourism industry will thrive, but the most important thing is that we have a decent democracy, one that works for the people and where we elect everybody who is going to be in that building.
So the last time, this is the major demonstration that you've had since the coronation. Yep. You guys were planning to protest on that day, but that didn't happen, did it?
Well, we had 2,000 people protesting on that day, but it was heavily disrupted by the police. Obviously, 8 of us were arrested and held for the entire day, so some of us didn't get to protest. So, that's now subject to us suing the police. We've had some conversations with them today. So far, so good. So we're not expecting a repeat of that problem.
Thank you so much,
okay,
Graham. Thank you. So, as I said, the Republic are expecting 500 people to be protesting with them, and that's due to take place from 9:15 this morning.
OK, thanks very much indeed for that, Lisa. Of course, lots of the topics mentioned in today's King's speech will have ramifications across the country. We're joined now by 2 of our reporters. Sophie Reaper, to you first. You're focusing this morning on the impact on tobacco sales.
Good morning to you both. Yes, the Office for National Statistics released data earlier this year to suggest that around 6.4 million Brits are in fact smokers. So if this legislation were to be passed, it would have huge ramifications. Now, of course, it was first brought up at the Tory party conference last month with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announcing this potential legislation being brought in. And what that would mean is anyone born on the 1st of January 2009, aka anyone who would be turning 14 this year, they would never legally be able to purchase tobacco-based products. Now, first of all, that would have massive impacts on the tobacco industry itself, with the British retail industry potentially warning for impacts there on the retail industry. But also, it would have major impacts for health, with people now suggesting that this could potentially remove young smokers as early as the year 2040.
Thank you, Sophie. We're going to go to Ray Addison now, and he'll give us his input. Ray.
Good morning to you both. Yes, under this new raft of legislation, the worst offenders will be kept behind bars for longer, the government says. For example, horrific murderers, those who commit crimes involving a sadistic or sexual element, face spending their whole life behind bars. Judges also forced to get tougher as well, required to hand down whole life terms, and only not allowed to do that in exceptional circumstances for the worst crimes. Aggravating factors will have to be considered as well. If somebody murders a partner at the end of their relationship, or people who've been involved with grooming gangs, and also criminals forced to face their victims, or they could get another 2 years on their sentence.
OK, Ray, with that, thank you, and thank you to Sophie Rupert as well. There we go, quite a comprehensive overview there of all the different elements in this really sort of historically significant day in terms of, well, the royal family and indeed the new season of Parliament.
OK, it's exactly a month since Hamas's horrific attack on Israel, but as Israel now fights back against Hamas with their invasion of Gaza, a lot of people now asking whether this whole response is disproportionate.
Overnight, leaders at the United Nations urged enough is enough. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres had this to say about the current situation.
Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. Hundreds of girls and boys are reportedly being killed or injured every day. More journalists have reportedly been killed over a 4-week period than in any conflict in at least 3 decades. More United Nations aid workers have been killed than in any comparable period in the history of our organization. We must act now to find a way out of this brutal, awful, agonizing dead end of destruction.
Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel would consider tactical little pauses to facilitate the entry of aid or the exit of hostages.
But again, Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire despite growing international pressure.
GB News' security editor Mark White in Tel Aviv, and he joins us this morning to tell us more. Mark, good morning to you.
Good morning, Eamonn. Yes, as far as these tactical little pauses are concerned, that seems to be similar to what the US, the UK and other Israeli allies have been asking for, humanitarian pauses to allow aid trucks in across that Rafah crossing, or aid supplies perhaps to be dropped like the Jordanians did a couple of nights ago, and also to allow some of these foreign nationals out. Remember, there are still thousands of foreign nationals or dual nationals trapped in Gaza waiting to get out across that border into Egypt. But I think what Israel will not countenance, and this is from Prime Minister Netanyahu himself speaking to ABC News in the States last night, is a ceasefire. He said they will not go down the road of a ceasefire until Hamas release the more than 240 hostages that they're holding. And even then, I doubt that the ceasefire would be long-lived, because Israel's goal is to either degrade Hamas to the extent that it can't pose a threat to Israel anymore, or completely remove Hamas from the scene. And in fact, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that once this conflict is over, they are going to have to take up the security responsibility for Gaza, which means effectively that they'll be reoccupying Gaza, that you will have Israeli ground troops in Gaza going forward for however long it takes to get a more permanent solution in place, much as we have in the West Bank. But I think there is no doubt that there will still be remnants of Hamas there. There will be a radicalised population with what has happened in recent weeks, and going forward it will be a low-level insurgency that Israel will be faced with in Gaza. But from Israel's point of view, it's probably viewed as the lesser of two evils. If they can go in on the ground, it will prevent, in their eyes, Hamas being able to regroup and launch attacks at some point in the future.
OK, Mark White, thanks very much indeed.
Now, more political drama, this time stateside in a courtroom, and the lead role is former President Donald Trump.
Here's what he told reporters in New York. Just a warning, this clip contains flashing images.
Because it's a scam, and this is a case that should have never been brought, and it's a case that now should be dismissed. Everybody saw what happened today. Everybody saw what happened with their star witness, who admitted that. I never told him what he originally said. I did. He admitted that he lied, and he has absolutely no credibility whatsoever. That's their only witness.
OK, no shortage of Donald Trump talking, but the ex-president was warned to avoid political speeches and just answer the questions by the judge threatening to remove him from the courtroom in a series of tense exchanges.
And the former US president's accused of inflating his net worth, except, of course, when he was putting in his taxes, and he, of course, denies any wrongdoing. Let's get some analysis in all of this. Greg Swenson, regular on the programme, chairman of Republican Overseas, joins us. Good morning to you. At one point, the judge said that Donald Trump was like a broken record, and it's hard to disagree with that, even if you are a Trump fan. It was the same old arguments and the same old rhetoric time and again.
Yeah, Isabel, I think you're right. You know, it was sort of classic Trump, you know, somewhat immature, somewhat self-destructive. He's not making any friends in the courthouse, or especially with the judge, and also pretty clumsy. But, you know, the question is, will it hurt him politically? It might hurt him in the case, and especially if he gets barred from the courtroom. But it surely helps him politically, and you see that in the numbers, and it's clear that, you know, all of these indictments and the trials are actually helping him with at least with Republican voters, but even it's looking now like it's working with independents as well.
Independents, that's a good word. That's a good word, Greg. Tell me, how independent is the judge, or if we don't want to talk about this judge, judges in general in the USA? Because I'm beginning to listen to what Trump's saying in terms that it is a political agenda against him, and the fact that the case brought by the Attorney General in New York as well. How biased would you say the whole thing is?
We lost him. That's a shame. We'll see if we can reconnect to Greg Swenson there, only down the road here in London. But as always, internet's always a tricky one. And just keen to hear from him, obviously, as a Republican, exactly how divided or political he thinks that the legal system is.
Oh, yeah. Just see if you heard that, Greg, or where we were at that. But basically, I was saying this set two between Trump and the judge and the Attorney General in New York. How politically biased, how much credence does Trump's claim that it is politically biased?
I think he's got a great claim there. And even if you don't support Trump, and I would rather see someone else win the nomination, but it's pretty clear. Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, you know, ran her campaign on one theme, which was, I'm going to get Trump. And so what you're seeing is his antagonists, even his enemies or opponents, they're not trying to beat him politically. They're just, you know, really using the criminal justice system to try to keep him out of office. It might be done, you know, quite deliberately in the near term to make sure he's the nominee, because I think the Democrats on the left want him to be the nominee. But I think it could backfire on them as we get closer to the general election.
I struggle to understand this because, you know, clearly the American system is different from here in the UK, and, you know, a lot of the big appointments are political, and I understand all of that. But in a court of law, you have criminal thresholds or civil thresholds, a burden of proof. All of these things need evidence. You can't just have an opinion. If you want to convict someone, it doesn't matter what your political persuasion is, surely.
Yeah, that's how it should be, Isabel. I mean, it's a great point. The problem is, I think that the criminal justice system has indeed been weaponized here. So they're overlooking a lot of the statutes and a lot of the common sense. They would never bring this case against a normal or anybody but Trump. And in fact, yeah, and I think that's why most of these indictments will fail. And I think I ultimately think he'll win. It's tough to call at this point. You've got a hostile judge and an extremely hostile attorney general that are, again, using the system against a political opponent. It's not a good look, and it's somewhat embarrassing for the U.S. right now.
But in this particular case, sorry, just on that, I mean, he has already been found guilty of fraud. This particular trial's just looking at exactly how much damages he'll have to pay.
Yeah, again, it's sort of, a bit of a reach. They're taking charges that would normally be misdemeanors and making them felonies. In this case, you don't have any damages, or there's really no cause from or argument from the victims of this, which you would expect, are the banks. In this case, Deutsche Bank and the other banks in the syndicate have never taken issue with what President Trump did in applying for these mortgages, these property loans. So, there's no damages here, and that's why it's kind of absurd that the banks did not bring this case, because the banks actually profited and did well and are used to doing business with the Trump family and the Trump business. So, this is a classic case of a rather aggressive attorney general making a case and again running her campaign on her ability to get Trump, or her promise to get Trump. So, I think it's a real stretch. There might be an indictment, most probably the documents case, where there are some legal merits to it, but surely the New York cases have little to no merit at all.
Greg, just finally and briefly, we saw some fervent Trump supporters there. You are, of course, the chairman of Republican Overseas. What's the temperature of Republicans overseas towards Donald Trump?
Well, it's getting better, that's for sure. As I mentioned earlier, the indictments actually help him. So, yes, you have a solid core group of Trump supporters, call it 20 to 30% of the party, but then you have a lot of Republicans overseas here in the UK that might not miss Trump, but they missed 2019. We had peace and prosperity during his administration, and now we have very little of both. And then the third group is the people that maybe are sympathetic, more the independent or moderates that don't particularly like President Trump, but they see this weaponization of the justice system, and now they look at Trump as a political martyr. That's really going to help him in the primaries. It's helping him in the polls right now. So there's no doubt that these indictments and cases are helping him politically. And maybe that's, again, what the left and the media in the U.S. legacy media want. They want him to be the nominee because they think they can beat him. That might be true, but it might also backfire on them.
Greg Swenson, really good talking to you. Thanks for your input. Greg is chairman of Republican Overseas.
And Eamonn, they're asking about the political temperature of Republicans overseas. We're going to take a look at the temperature here in the UK with Aidan McGibbon.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a chilly start out there for some of us, but bright skies to follow for much of the morning and into the afternoon, albeit with a fair number of showers still around through today. The coldest weather, northeast Scotland, a few mist and fog patches to clear through the morning. They will clear. And then it's another day of sunny spells and showers. The showers will be frequent and quite heavy in the west first thing. They'll tend to ease into the afternoon, whilst the odd one will pop up further east at this stage. Quite a breeze continuing as well. That's going to make it feel on the cool side, but temperatures won't stray far from the average for the time of year. 12 or 13 in the south, 10 or 11 further north. The showers do tend to fade away into the evening, although one or two will continue in the west. Clear skies then becoming prevalent, especially for eastern parts during the early hours, and as a result temperatures will fall away with once again a touch of frost possible, especially for northeast Scotland. But it's going to turn milder through the night in the west, with the wind picking up and outbreaks of rain arriving by dawn. And it is a damp start to the day away from Northern Ireland, where we see the rain move through before the sun rises. Elsewhere, it's outbreaks of rain continuing through the morning and into the afternoon. A brief spell of gusty winds and heavy rain as it all clears eastwards. And then brighter skies follow for the afternoon. But further frequent showers affecting Northern Ireland and Scotland. Some of these will turn to snow over the mountains.
When we come back, we're going to be getting a first-hand account of what to expect from the King's speech this morning. We're joined by former Lib Dem MP Norman Baker, who's been there when the late Queen did some of her speeches. That and more coming up.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Been previewing it all morning. The state opening of Parliament, which is going to happen just after 11 today. It's the King's speech.
And this morning we're being joined by the royal author and former Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker, who's sat through many a King's, or should I say Queen's speech before in the past. Do you think it'll be a bit different, given that we know a little bit about the King's political views? I mean, the papers are making quite a lot of the fact that he's going to have to read out Rishi Sunak's kind of ripping up of Green agenda.
Well, the King will have to read out what's written for him. He hasn't got any say in the matter. He may have a negotiation about 1 or 2 phrases, but essentially it's the government's programme, and he is there just to read it out, like a newsreader would on the television. I remember being in the Queen's speech back when the Labour Party was seeking to reduce the hereditary powers of the House of Lords. and the Queen was reading out, this government will abolish the hereditary principle. And I can see the Queen thinking, hang on, what's this about?
So what is the point, you know, given that he has no involvement? I mean, he's the head of the state, but, you know, it's a sort of constitutional, symbolic role, but sort of pointless reading it out if it's got nothing to do with him.
Well, it's symbolic in that sense, but, I mean, literally and ultimately, the King could, in theory, have absolute power. It's never been removed from him. I mean, it's not exercised, and if it were exercised, there'd be outrage from politicians and the public at large. But it's never been taken away legally. So legally it is his government, legally they are his ministers, and legally it is his legislation.
OK.
Well, how excited are you getting by what you believe will be in that speech or not?
Well, look, I mean, the speech is designed not to produce a whole lot of bills, I don't think, because we don't know when the election will be. It may be as soon as April. It's designed to set clear water between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party and to try to persuade Labour to take a different view on policy so they can go to the country and say, aha, they're soft on crime, or whatever they want to say as a consequence of the opposition that might come to the bills. I mean, some of the bills are quite sensible. The leaseholds reform, the no-fault evictions, that was promised some time ago. I suppose the thing about autonomous vehicles might come forward. I think that's reasonably uncontroversial. Rishi Sunak's cigarette ban is a bit more controversial, but probably not on a party basis. I think where I've got concerns are the idea that the police would be able to enter property without a warrant. That seems to me to be...
you have to have a sort of high threshold of evidence in order to do that.
But they clear themselves without a judge. And the point about a warrant is that you have to have an external person in a legal position to say, there is a reason for entering this property, I agree with you. And that's a safeguard in a democracy. Otherwise, you move towards a police state, in theory, where the police decide themselves when they get into buildings. That's rather worrying. Also, the issue about longer sentences. The government's obsessed by longer sentences. You know, the reality is, and I know this from my time at the Home Office, what deters criminals is not the length of a sentence, it's the likelihood of being caught and successfully prosecuted. That's a different thing entirely. And at the moment, we've got 65,000 cases backlog in the courts that haven't been dealt with. People are on remand for years. You've got every single prison which is overcrowded, including, I saw that one of your reports was down at Lewis today, actually, my own town. I mean, that place is heaving to the gunnels with prisoners. So, I mean, I don't think longer sentences themselves are going to deter crime.
What do you do when it's all over? I mean, how does it last? 90 minutes or so, doesn't it?
Well, yes, it's a pantomime of sorts. I mean, the Commons is called up to the Lords. There's not enough room, of course, but the MPs traipse up to the Lords. We stand behind the bar.
Some people faint, don't they, sometimes?
They could do. I mean, it depends how long...
You stand behind the bar, you mean like a bar, a drinking bar?
I'm afraid not, no.
Could you go for a drink afterwards?
A rail. Well, what happens afterwards, of course, is once the King has given his speech, then you'll see the pictures today of the MPs walking back to the Commons, and you'll see traditionally the leader of the Conservative Party and the Labour Party walking in tandem, and you can see whether they're going to talk to each other or whether they aren't. Sometimes they do, sometimes
they're quite
they don't.
Friendly, aren't they?
I don't think Jeremy Corbyn talked very much
I remember that.
to his opposite number. And they walk back, and then there's an interesting thing, which is, as part of the ceremony, is a black rod comes down to summon the Commons, and he has a door slammed in his face, just to bang the door, and the door of the Commons is actually indented by years of black rod banging it. Now, that's a very important tradition, I think, because it tells the Lords that the elected House is more important than the unelected House.
Very good.
Interesting.
There we go back to it again. Knock 3 times on the ceiling if you want me.
Do you know that one?
Twice on the pipe.
Dawn, you're right.
If the answer is no. Do you know that song? You know
Yeah. Number one, it was for Dawn.
What was you? We were thinking, is it 70, 71?
It was 73, I think, on the bell.
Oh, you're going 73?
Gosh, look at that knowledge.
That's great. Great. Excellent. Right, here's Paul Coit, who's not only here to sing and add chorus to what we talk about here. What was the singing like at the Tottenham Stadium?
Singing was pretty good. They sang one for Norman. They did another Dawn one, which was tie yellow jacket round the old politician, I think is what it was. Is that right? Is that how the song used to go?
Close, Paul, not quite.
Oh, sorry, young politician. I beg your pardon. I knew it was something like that. It was very noisy. It was an incredibly exciting game, but I thought I'd get someone on to talk about it. You happy with that?
Ooh, very happy with that.
I think we've got Spurs legend, one of the great captains of all time, man that was there last night, the great Gary Mabbott is with us this morning. Morning, Gary.
Good morning, Paul.
Great to see you. Firstly, how are you feeling after that? Because I'm still a little bit shaky.
I've got to be honest, Paul, if you were looking forward to a thrilling, exciting, entertaining game with VAR, then you would not be disappointed. If you're looking forward to a great game of football, unfortunately, our beautiful game, the spirit was sucked out of it last night by VAR.
What about the tactics that Postecoglou used last night? This just sort of going for it, this high press and whatever. Is it the way you would have played it, Gary?
Of course, at the start, it was exactly right. I thought that the first 15 minutes, we completely outplayed Chelsea. We got a goal in front, could have gone 2-0 up, but had disallowed goals from Son. The goal was disallowed. So that was frustrating. We could have been in total command of the game. Of course, going into the game last night, we could have gone back top of the table if we'd have got a victory. We were unbeaten after the first 10 games. And to be honest, it's been a great start to the season. Now, when we've gone down to 9 men, that's where the questions are being asked about the tactics, whereby we played a very high flat line. Now, that is a very dangerous line to play because, yes, the first 2 or 3 you may catch the opponents offside, but then they're always going to break through at some stage. And, of course, we kept at it, but in the last few minutes, obviously, we conceded the goals.
It's interesting, Gary, because so many other pros in the game are saying, oh, it's very naive what Ange did. And for anybody that's not aware of that, and Eamonn mentioned that high line, it's basically pushing everybody further up the pitch and trying to get the win instead of consolidate and sit back and just try and save the game. But Ange said, he makes no apologies for it, does it? That's the way he wants to play. It's very exciting. And the fans loved it, though, Gary.
The best thing about it, Paul, was at the end of the game, all the fans were still there. They could clap the team off the field of play because when we were down to 9 men, there was great spirit being shown, great effort being shown. And, of course, we kept going for it. We kept going forward. We kept trying to get the opportunities. Bentancur had a great chance and just went past the post. So, yes, Ange so far this season, you can't really question anything that he has done because generally he's picked a very offensive team, got at the opponents, asked the opponents questions. That's exactly what he was doing last night until, of course, VAR stepped in.
VAR. There it is again. Gary, good to see you. Your throat sounds better than mine does. Thank you very much indeed, the excellent Gary Mabbutt.
Well, yeah.
I think I've got closure now. That's it. I feel better about the whole thing.
Good.
Okay.
Good man.
Thank you both very much indeed. Good to hear from Gary Mabbutt there. Still to come, the poppy that's dividing social media. Is this a bridge between cultures or a step too far? Coming up next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Going through the papers and looking at some of the stories making headlines today. Joining us to do this morning, we have the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Newsom, and the deputy editor for The Spectator, Freddie Gray. And Dawn, we're going to start with you. We were teasing this just before the break. A woman on X has shared a photo of her poppy, which is knitted in Palestinian colours.
Yeah.
It got 35,000 likes. It's had some mixed reactions.
Well,
Your own thoughts?
It's her mum that's knitting them, to be fair, and it vaguely looks like a poppy, doesn't it? I mean, look, the armistice is about celebrating the end of World War I and peace. What everybody right-minded wants now is peace in the Middle East. So I actually don't have a huge problem with this, I must admit. This isn't celebrating Hamas, it's not celebrating terrorism, it's not celebrating the appalling atrocities that happened in Israel. It is hopefully aiming for peace. That's my interpretation of it.
There are a lot of poppy police out there, though, and people are very fussy about poppies.
I agree. I think, well, firstly, I think that looks more like a bullet hole than a poppy, which is why...
So you're helping, Freddie.
Which is why some people might find it objectionable. I think if you get upset about people wearing poppies, you're ridiculous. If you get upset about people not wearing poppies, you're also quite ridiculous. It's a good thing. It's not a necessity. It's not a legal obligation. And I think it's the sort of culture war spats that we can really do without, about, you know, what sort of poppies you should wear. I mean, that in itself is not an offensive thing. It's not a Hamas logo.
No. The trouble is that the Hamas group have kind of commandeered the Palestinian flag a little bit.
Well, exactly. It's like the far right, once upon a time in this country, commandeered the Union flag as well. But, you know, it's something and nothing. It's like the paper hats in the fire, isn't it? I mean, just keep that poppy away from any fires, otherwise you are certainly going to go viral on Twitter.
Well, let us know at home what you think about that. I have a feeling I know which way that's going to go, but always interested to know either way. GBViews at gbnews.com.
Looked at a survey today, Dawn, in the Star, which says 1 in 4 bosses are psychos.
Which means 3 in 4 aren't, speaking as a former boss. Well, basically, yeah, it's bosses who lead their firms by fear are costing the economy £2.2 billion a year, with productivity and performance are hit as workers are too worried to work properly, basically. Now, I had the huge pleasure of working for Robert Maxwell, Rupert Murdoch and Richard Desmond over my career.
Any psychos there?
No, all very, very lovely people. No.
You don't work for them anymore, Dawn. No, you can say what you really think.
They're driven.
Yeah.
Yes.
Robert Maxwell was surely I don't wish to speak ill of the dead, but surely he was a complete lunatic.
Yeah, well, OK, all right, fair point. I mean, yeah, he was, you know, and ripped pensions off, etc., etc. But, I mean, the thing is with this, there's a fine... I'm not talking about those 3 people, by the way. There's a fine line between being driven and trying to get the best for your company and sort of being a psycho and being a bully.
But do you think it's chicken or the egg? Do you become a psycho by trying to manage people, or are psychos drawn to controlling people?
There have been serious... I mean, this is a bit of a fun survey, obviously, but there have been serious psychological studies done on people who are at the top of their game.
Hate to be a boss.
Are running businesses are probably psychos, or at least sociopaths at the very best.
I'd just like to say that my boss is very... he's a very reasonable person. He's not a psycho at all.
No.
Never has been.
How's that pay rise going?
Never will be. I'm just shaking as I say it.
Freddie, let's talk about Meghan and Harry. So they like a night out. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But when they live in California and the act they're going to see, Katy Perry, is performing in Las Vegas, how do they go about it?
They fly on a Texan Oil Airs private jet. And this is, of course, an eco-hypocrite story. And who doesn't like a good eco-hypocrite story? They say that the world is on fire, and it is a classic. It applies to us. The rules apply to you and not to us, is the inference. And, of course, it comes interesting at a time when, if you look at the Sun inside, there's a down page, you can see Prince William flew BA, which reminds me of... Do you remember when the last time there was a big fuss about Harry and Meghan flying on private jets? And then there was a time splash of William flying Ryanair.
Down from Aberdeen or something?
Yeah,
Yes.
and you thought it all seems slightly contrived, all this plane wars between the two feuding brothers. But, you know, I mean, it is obviously ridiculous to preach to people about the world being on fire and then to jet around on Oil Air's private jets. And it's quite fun to call them out on it, so I'm all for it.
I mean, William was flying out to Singapore, wasn't he, for his what's it called? Earthshot
Prize.
The Eco Awards thing. So,
And to do the dragon race.
yes,
where he rode
dragon
magnificently.
racing, which is, yeah.
I couldn't care less whether people fly on a private jet or a jumbo jet or whatever the heck it happens to be, but I do care if they preach about it the way Meghan and Harry do, and then, as we say, don't do as one says, do as...
Exactly that, Eamonn. I totally agree. I mean, look, drive what car you want, fly how you want,
Yes.
etc., etc. Just don't lecture me on going for my 1 week holiday in Spain every year.
Mm-hmm.
Shall we talk about Donald Trump in court yesterday, Freddie? Making lots of the headlines this morning. Will it have hurt him or not? He was pretty rude to the judge. The judge, on occasions, looked exasperated, saying it was like a broken record. He didn't seem to understand that he was needing to follow court regulations, etc.
He was rude to the judge. I have to say, Judge Arthur Engeron, as he's called, I think he's slightly theatrical too, and I think he's enjoying...
A lot of judges. I mean, the whole
of course he is, but I think they're slightly hamming this up because of the story and because it's Donald Trump. And as I've just said in the piece on The Spectator, do go and have a look. It is legal... It's politics dressed up as legal theatre, and there's no point pretending it isn't. So when the judge berates Trump for saying this is not a political campaign, Trump is right to say this. You're a hack. You bought a political hack's arguments against me, because it is politics. It's politics in the courtroom, and everybody in America can see it, and that's why it doesn't hurt Trump in the polls. It actually helps him.
Oh, there we go. Barbara Streisand.
Yeah, so there's a link here between, you know, the difference. But I was just going to say, sort of like, you know, the one thing American politics makes you glad for is British politics, and ours are nuts, so theirs are even worse. But there's a link here, and this is Barbara Streisand. She's 81 years old. She's got her autobiography coming out, My Name is Barbara. And in it, she talks about she was so relieved to come to England to shoot a film because this country is far less sexist than the United States.
Really?
Yeah, which is interesting. And she talks about still feeling very self-conscious about her looks and the effect that had on her over her career. But the fact that she also lists the famous men, she does it in a way that I think her generation of women would talk about it, whereas younger generation of women would be far more, what's the word, explanatory about what went on. But she lists of famous men who were infatuated with her. Omar Sharif wrote a long, passionate letter begging her to leave her husband. The King, our very own Charles, described her as devastatingly attractive with great sex
They covered this in The Crown, didn't they? His little crush on Barbara Streisand.
While Marlon Brando introduced himself by kissing the back of her neck, as you do. Now, try that now to a young actress in Hollywood. Hashtag me too, yeah. But the saddest thing about this, she's 81. She is amazing. 250 million records, 10 Golden Globes, 5 Emmys, 2 Oscars. Amazing career. And you know what, Isabel? She says, I want to live my life now. I want to get in my husband's truck and be happy. I haven't had much happiness in my life. And I just thought, oh, my God, at 81, how sad is that?
Yeah, let's have a listen to how she phrased all of that.
I want to get in my husband's truck and just wander, go around, hopefully with the children somewhere near us. When they come over, they love playing with the dogs, you know, we have fun. I haven't had much fun in my life.
Working too hard. You see, it's a bit like you, Eamonn. I actually thought of you when I heard this interview yesterday. Because sometimes you say, you know, if you had your time again, you'd be much more badly behaved.
Definitely.
And I think there is something to be said for, you know, not being all work.
What would you do, Eamonn?
And no play.
What would
I'd do everything that I wasn't supposed to do. My trouble
you do
is
a lot of that.
I was on television when I was 19, doing 5-day-a-week programming.
And you married the first girl you kissed.
Huh? At 19, I had to act as if I was 40. So I think I would do that differently. But it's easy for anybody to get into a rut of providing for their family, doing the right thing all the time. And so whatever her business was, she did it. She got on the treadmill, and she obviously looked back and thinks, where did that time go? The thing about all our lives, no matter how old you are, you will suddenly go, what? Is that it? Is it over now? Is that it? So it'll go very, very quickly. Life will go quickly. So I tell you, if you're in your 30s now, start living your life, because suddenly you'll wake up and you'll be 50.
Can you relate? I mean, Dawn, you're the hardest working person I've ever met in my life. Can you relate to that?
I can, and I think...
you have more fun.
You pack a lot of fun. No, she packs
pack a lot of fun in as well. It's like, you know, I just don't sleep that much. But I think Eamonn's so right, and I think time does fly past so quickly, and you often forget what's important in life. An important thing is your friends and your family and having some fun. And
you can say all that, but you still have to pay your mortgage and your rent.
Well, this is the point. This is the problem.
You know, so we can all say, oh, this is what's important from the hindsight of coming out the other side. But when you're there,
time. You know, I just constantly think I wish I made more time for my mum. And she says, oh, you're working so hard. You're working so hard. But anyway.
Well, I think what I liked about what Barbara Streisand said was that you know, notoriety and fame can actually get in the way of you having fun. And for a lot of young people, certainly I see my children looking at the internet and online, so just all that matters is your ability to project yourself. And actually, for someone to say I was extremely famous and it got in the way of me having fun, I think it's quite refreshing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Go live your life, basically.
Can I just say the Poppy story, the inbox has gone absolutely mad, as you might expect, and I'm reading these unedited, so do bear with. People who choose to wear the Poppy to honour Armistice Day, it's optional for sure.
It's not optional.
But the colours...
You try doing our job. Are you actually telling me that if, and we do choose to wear, we're not making any protest, if Isabel and I came on here without a Poppy, we'd be allowed to? Not by the company, but by you, the viewers and listeners.
Yeah, we often get told they're not on correctly. Yes, I take issue with the Palestinian poppy. The poppy was chosen for its huge symbolic significance when poppies adorned the battlefields after World War I. It should be honoured and respected as a symbol of thanks and remembrance for all who made sacrifices for us. If you want to show solidarity for Palestine, get your own symbol. Do not hijack the poppy.
Interesting point. Well, very good. Keep those points coming in. Dawn, Freddie, thank you both very much indeed for today's look at what's going on in the world. More of the same after this short break.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a chilly start out there for some of us, but bright skies to follow for much of the morning and into the afternoon, albeit with a fair number of showers still around through today. The
coldest weather. Northeast Scotland, a few mist and fog patches to clear through the morning. They will clear. And then it's another day of sunny spells and showers. The showers will be frequent and quite heavy in the west first thing. They'll tend to ease into the afternoon, whilst the odd one will pop up further east at this stage. Quite a breeze continuing as well. That's going to make it feel on the cool side, but temperatures won't stray far from the average for the time of year. 12 or 13 in the south, 10 or 11 further north. The showers do tend to fade away into the evening, although 1 or 2 will continue in the west. Clear skies then becoming prevalent, especially for eastern parts during the early hours, and as a result temperatures will fall away with once again a touch of frost possible, especially for northeast Scotland. But it's going to turn milder through the night in the west, with the wind picking up and outbreaks of rain arriving by dawn. And it is a damp start to the day away from Northern Ireland, where we see the rain move through before the sun rises. Elsewhere, it's outbreaks of rain continuing through the morning and into the afternoon. A brief spell of gusty winds and heavy rain as it all clears eastwards. And then brighter skies follow for the afternoon, but further frequent showers affecting Northern Ireland and Scotland. Some of these will turn to snow over the mountains.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tuesday the 7th of November. These are live shots from Tel Aviv in Israel very, very shortly. The country is set to pause for a minute's silence to commemorate the victims of the October 7th terror attacks. We'll be live there shortly.
Well, that comes as leaders of the United Nations say enough is enough and call for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, but Israeli airstrikes are intensifying. Mark White is in the capital, Tel Aviv.
A month on from the 7th of October attacks, Israel is tightening the noose around Gaza City. Despite the death and destruction already, the real battle is still to come.
Now, also today, as we've been mentioning in the programme, the King will outline the government's lawmaking plans during today's state opening of Parliament.
But has time already run out for Prime Minister Sunak to come up with new ideas and to swing the tide in the upcoming election? We'll have full analysis right here on Breakfast and throughout the day on GB News.
And in the USA, a court case or a campaign rally. A judge warns Donald Trump to end his political rants during a fraud trial into his business affairs.
Because it's a scam, and this is a case that should have never been brought, and it's a case that now should be dismissed.
And we'll have a little look at your forecast as well for the day with Aidan.
And you might not want to leave the house without an umbrella today. Another very showery day across the UK. Find out where we're most likely to see those showers in the full forecast coming up soon.
We're just on air for another 25 minutes, so if you've got anything to say, get in touch with us. You're very, very welcome to do that. Paul says, I'm not a Trump fan, but it's obvious that the Democrats are misusing the justice system to get to him no matter what.
On the marches, Norman says these so-called peaceful demonstrators chant Free Palestine. I haven't heard one of them chanting Free the hostages. And Lindsay says, I've noticed not many people are wearing poppies nowadays. Very disappointing, the world we live in. Keep your thoughts coming in this morning.
Here is the minute silence underway in Tel Aviv as the city pauses to remember those killed a month ago today.
We are taking the minute's silence that has been held across Israel this morning, a really important moment for a nation traumatised 1 month ago today in those horrendous Hamas atrocities where 1,400 people were brutally murdered. A minute's silence, in fact, broken there in song by the communities gathering together in Tel Aviv.
Let's go to Mark White, who's been observing that with us this morning to see what he has to say. Mark.
Well, of course, the international community may seem that those events are fading somewhat since the 7th of October, but right here in the heart of Israel, they absolutely are not. The reminders are everywhere, with not just the photographs of the 240 odd hostages who are still being held, but families of those hostages at various locations around Tel Aviv, reminding people that this is very much an ongoing battle in terms of not just the operation to try to deal with Hamas, but the fact that there are these innocent members of the public still being held by this terror group in Gaza. And just before you came to me, actually, just as this minute's silence was being observed there, we had another rocket alert, clearly timed by Hamas at that moment of 11 a.m. here local time. Just a month ago, exactly a month ago, those Hamas terrorists were pouring across the border from Gaza into those southern Israeli communities by motorbike and pickup trucks, in paragliders, on foot, pushing their way through the security fence and into southern Israel to carry out the most horrific of attacks. More than 1,400 people murdered by these Hamas terrorists, among them women, children, babies, and of course men as well, and members of the security forces and the police who came to the aid of those people caught up in this terrorist attack. Israel does not want the international community to forget those events a month ago, but understands, of course, with the news cycle that the images that are coming out of Gaza are horrific. It is having a toll on the civilian population there, as Hamas is embedded into the civilian infrastructure throughout Gaza. It is, as well as a terrorist group, the controlling entity in Gaza as well. But the Israeli government just asked people to try to remember those events a month ago and why they are engaged in this long and bloody conflict over the border in Gaza.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. In less than an hour's time, the pomp and ceremony of the state opening of Parliament will begin. I think it's at 11 o'clock, isn't it? It's not 10 o'clock.
And the build-up, the build-up's all getting underway.
The King's speech will be the centrepiece, of course.
And His Majesty's ceremonial address, his first as monarch, will detail the legislation that Rishi Sunak will be keen to push through before the next general election, which is expected to be next year.
On this very channel, full and continuous coverage from 9:30 a.m. That's what I meant to say. GB News political editor is in Westminster. That's Christopher Hope. Christopher, are you looking forward to it?
Yeah, I got my first one here for GB News. Can't wait. Behind me, in about 2.5 hours' time, we'll see the King in his golden state coach go through those doors, be dropped off, and then read out this the PM Rishi Sunak's plans for next year. His first, of course, as Prime Minister. It's a big deal. The last time we had this the Queen's speech, I should say, was in May 2022. That was the last time the government set out what it wanted to do in laws and bills and measures to try and improve our lives as Britons. And of course, that was when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister and the Queen was on the throne. A lot has happened since then, and this, behind all the pomp and circumstance, Eamonn, there's lots of cold, hard politics at play here, because the government's trying to show how they are taking tough calls. They say they want to change Britain for the future. They're trying to paint Keir Starmer as someone who moves with the short-term needs of politics. So there are 20 bills roughly in this King's speech. The main focus is going to be on law and order. They think they've got a good story to tell about falling crime, not across the border, of course, shoplifting elsewhere, but in the nub and the heart of it, they think that Britain is getting safer. They want to drive that home and press home that advantage. Other measures we'll see in this King's speech is going to be new ways to force the government to issue oil and gas licences every year by law. And the hope there, of course, if Labour win the election, the government will be thinking they'll force Labour to repeal that and show how they are taking a more pragmatic approach towards net zero. So lots of politics behind what will be a grand occasion here in Parliament.
Interesting. Anything that will be notable by being left out? For example, I think obviously the HS2 Northern leg won't be in there. Lots of speculation about whether conversion therapy, for example. Any other things that, have sort of dodged the speech?
I think we're not going to see, I don't think, the measures put out there by Suella Braverman about banning charities from giving out tents to homeless people, or there'll be measures to crack down on vagrancy, but nothing exactly on that point. As we saw yesterday on his visit to North Norfolk, the Rishi Sunak moved away from that language we heard from the Home Secretary Cilla Braverman at the weekend. It's not very political, this one. We're going to see probably in 2 weeks' time at the autumn statement. That's what everyone's looking at already in Westminster. We're looking past today, which will be a big day in terms of setting out the mood music for the final year of this Parliament and maybe the final year of Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. But what will happen in the autumn statement on taxation and other measures is what will really matter, I think, for voters.
Are you getting any sense of increased security, bearing in mind the tensions around the world and as we approach the Cenotaph commemorations this weekend?
Eamonn, that's right. This place is in complete lockdown. I've been here since about 7:30. Since then, you can't get around here. You're stuck here, and rightly so, I suppose, because you have got a real risk, I think, going into this big weekend on commemorations on Remembrance Sunday and Armistice Day on Saturday, and how that is. We have the demonstrations, of course, 500 or so Republican demonstrators who will always be here, want to sweep away the whole point of the monarchy and create a republic in the UK. But more widely, the concern is going to be about these protests from Palestinians concerned about what's happening we heard from Mark White in Gaza.
I suppose aside from the politics, and a lot of people, probably aren't that interested in politics, today is an opportunity to see some of the other sides of things that we do very well here, which is a bit of pomp and pageantry. We've had a history lesson, haven't we, this morning about hostage-taking and black rods and silk stockings and you name it. So give us a flavour of what we can expect to see.
We won't see it, but we of course know an MP is taken hostage in quotes and taken to Parliament while the King gives his speech. We'll see the King arrive in the golden coach behind us. I think you can hear horses on the cobbles behind me as I'm speaking. It is really the chance. We are getting quite used to pomp and circumstance. We saw, of course, the Queen's Jubilee last year, the coronation, I should say, and the pomp and circumstance of the funeral. I think these things all matter. They are what this makes our country tick and what we're so proud of, and today is another day of that.
OK, Christopher, thank you very much indeed. Enjoy, and just a reminder that we will have full coverage of this here on GB News from 9:30.
OK, still to come, we're going to be heading to Shrewsbury and speaking to... Is it Shrewsbury or Shrewsbury?
Either or.
Either or, OK. Shrewsbury, and speaking to veterans helping with the Royal British Legion's appeal for the poppies, and going to be talking about a fundraiser with all of that next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Highlighting Poppy Day in Shrewsbury. We'll be crossing there live very, very shortly.
Now, when you think of valuable professions in the UK, what springs to mind? Perhaps doctor, lawyer? Well, recent research from British Wool has found that farming is one of Britain's most cherished and essential vocations for those that work the land.
OK, in the daily life of a farmer, bookkeeping, handling large machinery, ensuring animal welfare are just a few of the many, many things that they would have to take into account. You think you know everything about being a farmer? Anna Riley will tell you more.
Farming is in the blood for fourth-generation farmer John Dawson. His family have been rearing cattle and sheep in the Yorkshire Dales for more than a century. Producing meat and dairy, he helps to feed and nourish the population. And the wool from his sheep clothes us, as well as furnishes and insulates our homes.
Come by. Come by.
Working 14 hours a day, come rain or shine, farming is a tough but vital vocation.
The scale of jobs that you do on a farm is terrific. From milking the cows to helping cows give birth, to mending water pipes, to using very, very high-tech machinery and equipment, milking parlours, tractors. Huge range of jobs.
Research from British Wool has found that mastering the skills of farmers in the UK like John would take over 15 years and cost nearly £200,000 in training.
What we do is undervalued, both in terms of looking after the environment and producing food. As long as food is cheap, people don't value it. They value the mobile phones, they value the skiing holidays. What I want people to do is to take as much pride in what they buy to eat and feed their children and their families as I do in producing it.
Wool from John's sheep is sold to British Wool, who represent all 35,000 sheep farmers in Britain. The company collect, grade and market British wool to the international wool textile industry, to be made into flooring, furnishing and clothing.
We're globally unique in the UK. There is a route to market for every sheep farmer. So anyone with wool in the UK can bring it to a depot within an hour of where they farm. And it's brought here and it's aggregated because we have over 60 breeds, over 120 grades. So if we didn't put it all together and put it in an amount someone like me can't buy it efficiently. And then we process it all in the UK.
Laxton's is the UK's leading specialist yarn manufacturer and buys and spins British wool in its mill for many different markets, including knitwear, crafts and upholstery.
It all starts at the farm, and if it wasn't for the farmers, you wouldn't have a product in your hand. Buying British supports the farming community, it supports the infrastructure in the textile infrastructure where we take the wool and put it into finished product. There's a lot of people employed in that entire chain, and the more that you know, we can support that, the bigger that can become, and the more support we can give for the farming community.
Farmers are crucial in society, and despite the demanding nature of their work, British Wool found more than 3/4 of farmers would still recommend the career. Anna Riley, GB News.
I used to think I wanted to be a farmer, but I realised too hard,
Same.
too tough.
As I love the idea of being outdoors, fresh air, at one with the animals, enjoying the trees and the birds.
But
no let up.
I'd take the Land Rover, though.
I'll take the... Yeah, I've always wanted a Land Rover Defender myself.
That would be nice. Shropshire Council is supporting a one-day poppy appeal organised by the Royal British Legion.
And the fundraiser will be a one-day collection across the town with 120 military personnel from RAF Cosford, RAF Shawbury and the Rifles.
Well, let's go to Jack Carson, who's there today, and he's with people who are taking part in all of this, one of which is a man from West Belfast, Paddy McCartney. Tell us more, Jack.
Yeah, good morning to you both. We're here, of course, right in the heart of Shrewsbury. You mentioned those military personnel. We've just seen them all march up ready, of course, to go out onto the streets today and raise money for the poppy appeal. But you're right, Eamonn, I am joined by Paddy McCartney. Paddy, just tell us a little bit about your service.
Good morning, Jack. Yeah, I was in the Army for 10 years. I served in the First Gulf War. I served in Bosnia. I was based in Shropshire, and I left in 1996.
And just kind of tell us then, leaving the service, you know, how has the British Legion helped you as a veteran?
As a veteran of the British Legion, I've been a fantastic help to myself. There was a Battleback Centre at Lillyshill. I do suffer from mental health problems, and by going to the Battleback Centre for a week for the kind of rehab training, outdoor activities, it was just a great help. And I can't thank them highly enough for the support they do for veterans around the country.
I mean, just kind of explain a little bit about the Battleback Centre for us, because not a lot of people might not have actually heard of what that is.
So yes, the Battleback Centre is basically a kind of place where people can go for a week. They can do some outdoor activities, cycling, mountain biking, canoeing, rock climbing, and there's some people there you can go to have a bit of some kind of rehab and talk, some therapy with these veterans and with obviously counsellors. And it's based in Shropshire.
I mean, of course, we're not far off Armistice Day. Coming up to this period, why is getting involved with the British Legion like this, raising money for the poppy appeal, why for you is it so important? It's important for me, obviously, to remember, obviously, our glorious dead. Obviously, my grandfather was killed in Burma during the Second World War, and it's always good to keep this and keep it going for generations to come. Of course, today is not just, of course, about selling the poppy. It's also, of course, about raising awareness and educating people about the poppy appeal. What do you kind of want to get across to people? Because some people, you know, especially young people growing up, might not really understand the importance of the poppy appeal. What would you kind of say to those young people about why, you know, even though you know, people only really associate it with the First World War or the Second World War, why, you know, it's still so important? I think obviously the First and Second World War are very important, but obviously all the conflicts like Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq, it's important to support the veterans throughout. Do you know what I mean? And obviously education, I think, is the key for children in school to learn about the importance of the British Legion and the poppy appeal. When it comes to Remembrance Day and Armistice Day, you mentioned, of course, you know, your own relatives that you know that have died in wars. You know, when you have those 2 minutes silence, what for you is the thing that you remember? I just obviously have remembrance of my grandfather. I didn't meet my grandfather, he was killed in Burma, but I had a friend who was killed in the First Gulf War and friends in Bosnia. So I just remember the veterans, the people who were killed, and just remember them and honour their memory. What things do you now remember about your time in the service? What for you did having that time in the military teach you? Respect, discipline, obviously camaraderie, friendship. That's what I miss the most, and the Battleback Centre at Lillyshill does provide that. And what for you maybe was the toughest moment for you? What's the thing that in all those years of service, you know, you couldn't still kind of think about today and had to overcome? I think just obviously my experience in the First Gulf War, obviously having some issues there from that, I do suffer from PTSD from that still, you know what I mean? But thank the Lord, obviously I do have good support from my wife, Julia, and my family do support me, so yeah, I'm a lot stronger now. Paddy, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Of course, veterans like Paddy are going to be here all throughout the day, of course, not only educating people on the importance of the poppy appeal, but also raising those vital funds as we head ever closer to Armistice Day.
Jack and Paddy, thank you both very much indeed. And just remember, that's when you buy one of these, That's where your money goes, to help people like Paddy with his post-traumatic stress, and so many people like him and in a worse position than he is. So that's what it's all about. Good luck to everybody in Shrewsbury today who's watching for their Poppy Collection Day.
Just a reminder, we are gearing up here on GB News for full coverage of the state opening of Parliament. It will be the first King's speech by His Majesty the King, and indeed it might be the last, lots of people predicting, from Rishi Sunak. Full coverage in just a few moments, but for now we say goodbye. Have a lovely day.
We will be back from 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Up next, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a chilly start out there for some of us, but bright skies to follow for much of the morning and into the afternoon, albeit with a fair number of showers still around through today. The coldest weather, northeast Scotland, a few mist and fog patches to clear through the morning. They will clear, and then it's another day of sunny spells and showers. The showers will be frequent and quite heavy in the west first thing. They'll tend to ease into the afternoon, whilst the odd one will pop up further east at this stage. Quite a breeze continuing as well. That's going to make it feel on the cool side, but temperatures won't stray far from the average for the time of year. 12 or 13 in the south, 10 or 11 further north. The showers do tend to fade away into the evening, although 1 or 2 will continue in the west. Clear skies then becoming prevalent, especially for eastern parts during the early hours.